Chapter 1. The Curious Case of the Banana-Hammocked Cowboy. Stephen Foster never thought he'd wake up on a pool table beside a nudist beauty queen. Of course, making small talk with a sword swallower wasn't part of his 5-year plan either. But the beer-goggle menage-a-trois with the butt-ugly hotel maids was the last straw. So there Stephen found himself, half naked in a hotel suite, straddling a stripper's pole with the kind of neon hangover that you could only get in Vegas, wondering how things could have gone so terribly wrong. Only one thought kept creeping into Stephen's mind. It was all Trevor Thompson's fault. But to understand the whole story, you had to go back before the booze-fueled Vegas romp, before the road trip gone wild, before the man-child mayhem, back to Stephen's last day in Missouri. Stephen's departure from St. Petersburg was bittersweet. He was leaving the town he grew up in, leaving his loving adopted mother Polly and her new taxidermist husband, pulling up stakes on his successful career as a redneck realtor. And, of course, he was leaving behind his partner in crime, Trevor Thompson. The decision wasn't easy, but after that fateful raft trip years before, Stephen had found his interests wandering far beyond the boundaries of St. Petersburg. How could anyone blame him? Stephen had been exposed to a whole new world, and he'd been itching to explore it ever since. So when his old friend Jim called from California, raving about the riches to be made as a realtor to the stars, naturally Stephen jumped at the opportunity. Stephen's mind had been stuck in the Golden State ever since, even while his body was stuck sleepwalking through the best going-away party the 98-cent store could buy. Cheap streamers, defective kazoos, Happy New Year 2009 sunglasses, and children's birthday party coned hats were the highlights of Stephen's send-off for 4 years of service. But Stephen's focus was on how quickly the prospect of free cake could get the office vultures to trip over each other. The same sourpusses that would nearly tip themselves over giving sideways glances forced fake greeting cards congrats on Stephen in the name of day-old baked goods. But amid the freebie hounds, at least one office mate was eager not to let Stephen go. Maybe a little too eager. Someone forgot to tell Annabelle McMurray it was Casual Friday. Dressed to impress, Annabelle did her best to offer herself up to Stephen as a going-away gift. "I can't believe you're really leaving," Annabelle lamented, as Stephen downed a sip of off-brand cola, wishing it were spiked. "I know it's hard to believe, but there is more to life than being a redneck realtor," Stephen replied, more concerned with whether his girlfriend, Nicole, would finally be packed when he arrived home. But Annabelle was determined not to be denied. "You know, Stephen, I'm really going to miss you." "Hey, a dude can only hawk houseboats and double-wides so long, you know?" Stephen continued, already planning the trip in his head all the way down to the bathroom breaks. "No, I mean I'm really going to miss you," Annabelle insisted, batting her eyes for Stephen. Stephen looked up from his cola for the first time to notice Annabelle's seductive smile. Annabelle had always been the road not taken, the unexplored country, the type of woman that spent more time trying to steal the other women's boyfriends than finding one of her own. But if Stephen was anything, it was loyal. "You've met my girlfriend Nicole, right?" Stephen remarked, knowing full well Nicole and Annabelle's tipsy karaoke chaos were the highlight of last year's holiday office party. But Annabelle didn't take the hint. "Have you met the twins? Maybe they can convince you to stay in town," Annabelle added, running her hand down her blouse while licking her lips. Of all the office parties in all the world, infidelity was trying to crash that one. But with visions of the doghouse already dancing in his head, Stephen wasn't about to taste the forbidden fruit. Not after all the work he'd done, carving a Garden of Eden of his own with Nicole, and the office going-away party was not the time to pilfer paradise. But Stephen soon realized all it took was a trip home to find out how quickly paradise could be lost. Stephen expected to be greeted by moving boxes just inside his front door, not by a banana-hammocked hick. But there Alan Johnson stood in Stephen's entryway, wearing tight spandex, a cowboy hat, and nothing else. "You're not the pizza dude," Alan lamented, sporting half a chub, much to Stephen's repulsion. This wasn't Stephen's first run-in with Porta Potty's star Porta Potty Stevenster. Alan had plowed through St. Petersburg's single scene like a tractor during harvest season. And, in a unique twist of irony, That pissant was actually Annabelle's date for last year's office holiday party. Never did Stephen imagine things would come full circle, with the shit hitting the fan on his own doorstep. "Fuck me like a rabid rhino. What are you doing here?" Stephen questioned, with equal parts rage and bewilderment. But Stephen didn't really want to know the answer, nor did he want to see Alan scratching his balls, but Stephen ended up with a front row seat to that fright fest. Stephen wasn't sure whether to pulverize Alan or puke. Alan made the choice easy. "I was about to ask you the same question, dude," Alan remarked, confused. "Didn't you get Nicole's text?" Stephen lit up like dynamite in a powder keg. Nothing could stop the tool from getting thrashed. Nothing except the sight of Stephen's half-naked honey. "Babe, what's taking you so long with the pizza?" "I want your meat stick," Nicole pleaded, wearing a bra and panties set all new to Stephen. If the image of Alan scratching his nutsack wasn't enough to make Stephen hurl, visualizing the love of his life, craving the douchebag's package was sure to cause projectile vomiting. Stephen felt his heart skip a beat. He could feel his lungs collapsing, like he'd been trampled by the bulls of Pamplona. "Awkward," Alan remarked, escalating the tension rather than cutting it. And like that, there was only one thing left to do. Stephen erupted like a roid-raging football linebacker desperate for a sack. But what Alan did lacked in rage. He made up for in karate skills. Before he knew it, Stephen found himself flipped on the ground, aching, with Alan's sweaty foot on his windpipe. "Look what you made Alan do to you." Nicole jumped in, adding insult to Stephen's injury. "What are you even doing here? Didn't you get my text?" "What text?" Stephen mustered, his stomach turning from the queasy mixture of toe jam and heartbreak. I sent you a breakup text an hour ago," Nicole replied, while grabbing her phone. Dagger, meet heart. But the gutting had just begun. "Oops," Nicole added. "I forgot to hit send." "You broke up with me over text message?" Stephen questioned, incredulous. All of a sudden the room went quiet with disbelief. Stephen tried to pick his jaw up from the floor as Nicole attempted to hide her embarrassment. Alan took a different tack. "Who could go for a drink?" Alan brain farted, his foot nearly in Stephen's mouth. "Try a six-pack." Who was this woman masquerading as my girlfriend? Stephen wondered as he sat on the couch, looking at Nicole as if she were a complete stranger. This wasn't the woman he'd spent the last 6 years love, honoring, and cherishing. It wasn't the same girl who nursed him through sickness and joked with in health. Stephen had returned home, expecting the Nicole he fell for while lost together in Murphy's corn maze, who massaged him for hours after back-breaking shifts at the weenie hut in college, who had a smile as wide as the Mississippi. No, this couldn't be Stephen's better half, his partner in crime, the woman he was going to spend the rest of his life with, because that Nicole wouldn't text dump him for a douchebag the night before they were supposed to move to California together. That Nicole wouldn't be looking at him stone-faced while a cowboy clown scarfed pizza and sung hick-hop lyrics to himself in the next room. No, there had to be some kind of explanation. "I can't go with you to California," Nicole muttered meekly. But Stephen wasn't about to let Nicole off that easy. "Oh, really? You think? But hey, why not wait until the last minute to cheat on me?" Stephen blasted. "Hey, this isn't my fault," Nicole fired back, looking like she actually believed it. "Right, because I made you shack up with Sir Douche-a-lot. Look, you're the one who chose making money over making babies." And there it was, the festering sore point in their relationship torn wide open. Baby fever was sweeping through St. Petersburg like a rabid tornado ripping through the heartland. Biological clocks were ticking like time bombs, leaving Nicole, at 25, feeling nearly over the hill for this baby boom. Nicole was the last holdout of her friends, only it was Stephen who was holding out on diaper duty. Nicole was content to stay in the sticks forever, raising a litter of ankle-biters. But growing up the pitied offspring of the town drunk, Stephen didn't want his kid to be known as Redneck Realtor Jr. Stephen wanted to make a name for himself that his future children would be proud of, and he realized leaving St. Petersburg was the first step to doing it. And although Stephen knew Nicole would drag her feet to California, it was only then he realizes how lead-footed she really was. "I thought you were warming up to California," Stephen pleaded. Besides, you know becoming a real estate mogul has been my dream. What about my dreams? I'm a simple country chick. Moving me to California would be like putting a cow on a leash and asking it to fetch. Inhibitions were one thing, but infidelity was a deal-breaker. Sure, Stephen was loyal, but he was no lapdog, and it was not the time to roll over. Of course, Stephen quipped. So why not just run off with the first hick with a heart on? Nicole put on the doe-eyed yet tight-lipped face that Stephen knew all too well. Here came a doozy. Let me explain it to you like this, Nicole said, like a mother disciplining a child. I'm ovulating, and I'm tired of waiting for you to put a bun in my oven. Alan, on the other hand, is itching for a rugrat of his own. Not to mention he's hung like an elephant on steroids. So you see, it's really a menstrual miracle, timing-wise. It was like being kicked in the balls with steel-toed boots. Stephen couldn't speak. Rather just stammered like a drunk on a trivia show, searching for a response. But what Stephen lacked in verbiage, he made up for in simmering rage. And finally, Stephen boiled over. I can't believe you're doing this to me, Stephen snapped. Do you know how much I've sacrificed for this relationship? I made papier-mâché with you, took ballroom dancing. Hell, I watched the Romance Diaries. Twice! The Romance Diaries was the Everest of chick flicks. The kind of, I can't believe what I'm doing to get laid, sappy weepfest that made women coo and men cringe. To brave the Romance Diaries meant instant carnal karma, and yet Nicole was only offering catastrophe. But Nicole wasn't content till she poured salt into Stephen's wound. If it'll make you feel any better, we could name our first kid after you. As Stephen drove past Minced Meat Butcher Shop, he started to realize what an ironic little bitch the universe could be sometimes. Staying faithful to your girlfriend at work while she rode a cowboy at home was like a nasty cosmic prank, but life had a way of piling it on. Driving down Main Street, nostalgia clotheslined Stephen like a low-hanging branch in the dark. Every street corner, every business he passed, haunted him like ghosts of memories past. As Stephen drove by High Street, he remembered dangling, doped up from the Boone's maple tree with Nicole, using tree branches like monkey bars, exploring each other's tonsils, passing drunk uncle's sports bar. Stephen had visions of the after-hours strip pool he won against Nicole and the skinny dipping in the Johnson's pool that followed. Nicole made another cameo as Stephen reached Sir Gorge-a-Lot, Stephen and Nicole's favorite haunt, where they were treated like the king and queen of Camelot every time they ordered. Doubt started to creep into Stephen's mind as he passed memory lane. He wondered if he was too quickly caught up in the Golden State's luster, that, maybe, he should have been content with the stars in the sky instead of those on Hollywood Boulevard, that abandoning a stable yet vanilla reality to chase down an elusive dream could lead to a lot of panning and no gold. Was that really a risk Stephen was willing to take? Was it even a risk worth taking? To leave your family, friends, the only home you'd ever known? But passing his old agency, the pit in Stephen's stomach settled. Then suddenly one thing was certain. Stephen Foster was done being a redneck realtor. Let's tear the roof off this one-whore town, Trevor Thompson declared, blatantly ignoring the foul stench of heartbreak in the air. Trevor was the kind of guy that thought everything could be cured with a good liquor lobotomy. A master of mischief, Trevor courted chaos like an arsonist in a log cabin. And boy, was he on fire. You look like someone fucked your girlfriend and shot your dog, Trevor continued, already buzzed before the going-away keg had been tapped. Not that Trevor was capable of even spelling heartbreak. This was a man-child, unable to commit to a job, no less a woman. He caused anarchy at the DMV, mayhem at McKinley's mortuary, and was at that point burning up Billy Bob's bingo and bowl as the shoe rental counter clerk. But if Trevor's employment history was less than illustrious, his roster of one-night stands was infamous. Lunch ladies, meter maids, pet psychics, you name it, Trevor porked it. But Trevor was one hell of a friend, the best Stephen would ever have. So when the life of the party wanted to throw an all-time rager, Stephen was tempted to put his own pity party on hold. Stephen's heart had other ideas, though. It was a strange setting for a pep talk. 2 dudes alone in a decorated barn. Strobe lights set to auto. Band equipment with semi-lethal Tai Chi etched on it, still ready to be rocked. But Trevor wasn't about to let a perfectly good keg go to waste. He suckled on a keg hose like an infant on a teat, while Stephen sat wide-eyed on a bale of hay. "You know what's wrong with you?" Trevor said, accusingly. "My girlfriend's getting knocked up by the village douchebag on the night before we're supposed to move to California together?" Stephen deadpanned. "No, your problem is that you see this as the end of the world. Instead, it's the best thing that ever happened to you." Trevor had never been a fan of Nicole. She was the voice of reason, the hardliner against hijinks that had kept Stephen from waking up hungover on highway-dwelling tractor-trailers. She had put an end to lost weekends of reckless shenanigans. Nicole represented the end of the beer-goggled era. It was like breaking up Watson and Holmes, Lewis and Clark, Dr. Frankenstein and Igor. But Stephen could tell by the glint in Trevor's eyes that mischief would soon be afoot again. "First of all, now you get to go cross-country with the schlonginator," Trevor boasted, speaking about his wang in the third person. "Wait a minute. You're going with me now?" Stephen questioned, incredulously. "Dude, I'm not just coming," Trevor boasted. "By the time I'm through, they'll be chiseling my face on Mount Sexmore." "Nicole always wanted to ride me on top of Mount Rushmore," Stephen lamented, burying himself in nostalgia. "Forget about that she-bitch," Trevor declared, as he crushed an empty beer can over Stephen's head. "We're talking 50 states of boning here." But Stephen was wrestling with 50 shades of depression. "First of all, ow," Stephen said, rubbing his sore noggin. "And second, Nicole's not a she-bitch." "Don't you just love the smell of procreation in the air?" Trevor quipped, and with the image of Nicole wailing for Cowboy dong seared into his brain, Stephen imagined the hodgepodge of hick love child would be. Stephen imagined the hodgepodge of hick that love child would become. An heir to the porta-potty sales throne. Nicole's enviable genetics wasted on some yabo yokel. But Trevor wasn't about to let his dreams of debauchery be dashed. "Slap a smile on your face. We're about to go on a coochication of epic proportions." "Trevor, this is not the time." "Seriously, this is our last chance to make up for lost debauchery. Like Spring Break '04. "Not this again," Stephen groaned to himself. "Seriously. Tell me you don't think about it. I had enough debauchery for a lifetime on tap." Trevor wasn't kidding. Trevor had planned a trip that made Mardi Gras look like a cotillion. A spring break you'd never forget, if you weren't too drunk to remember it in the first place. But that was a long time ago. Not long enough for Trevor, though. It was going to be legendary. "And you bailed on me for bullshit." "You mean Nicole's sister's wedding?" Stephen reminded Trevor. "Exactly. Look, everyone regrets the spring break that got away. But now we have a second chance to do it. Even kinkier." This wasn't Trevor's craziest idea ever. And Trevor was one hell of a pitchman. Stephen still couldn't drive past a picket fence without thinking of how Trevor convinced the neighborhood kids to whitewash it for him. But there was a time and a place for things. Not to mention heartbreak hardly seemed like a fertile fodder for cross-country calamity. "This isn't college," Stephen remarked. "I'm moving cross-country here. Doesn't mean you can't work up your libido along the way. Trust me, this trip will make spring break seem like getting an enema from your grandma. I promise you, by the time we get to California, they're going to put your boner in cement on the Walk of Fame." Chapter 2. The Redneck Regatta and Other Houseboat Horrors. St. Petersburg wasn't prepared for the going-away gift Trevor and Stephen left it. Stephen woke up, half naked, riding a cow ass backwards with a shotgun barrel in his face. Farmer Jones, the man on the other side of the trigger, looked like his roosters woke him up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe the farmer was expecting another miscreant. Or maybe he remembered the killer deal Stephen got him on his new barn. But when Jones saw Stephen mounted on his bovine, he immediately put his shotgun down. But no sooner did Stephen focus shift from bowel-quivering panic to his hangover did the farmer ask a question that came across more like an accusation. "Been hanging out with Trevor Thompson again, huh?" Trevor Thompson, meanwhile, made his bones waking up in unfamiliar corners of town. And that day was no exception. Still, finding yourself dressed in a novelty firefighter's costume in Mel's Mattress Mart was a first even for Trevor. But the hungover revelations didn't stop there. Trevor never pictured himself a chubby chaser. But waking up beside a porker in all too revealing naughty nurse outfit forced him to reconsider. The novelty nurse in question was Bertha Barth, Mel's kinky daughter. She smiled wide at Trevor while rubbing her thonged rump. "Damn, my ass'll be sore until harvest season. You up for another round, Tiger?" "Holy shit! How did you and I end up—" Trevor was too gobsmacked to finish his question. If Trevor was ever going to give up drinking, Bertha's cankles would be enough to get him on the wagon. "Oh, come on," Bertha remarked, with the confidence of someone half her size. "We both know you've already boned everyone else in town, and with a totem pole like that, I can see why." Trevor made a beeline for the exit, until he saw Mel, in a furor, barreling towards him like a rabid rhino. "Bertha Barth, what in God's name are you doing?" Mel foamed. "Hi, Daddy," Bertha proclaimed, like a kid in a candy store. "Meet my new boyfriend." Trevor's face turned beet red as Mel did his best prizefighter imitation. Trevor grabbed a memory foam pillow at the last moment and absorbed Mel's incoming haymaker before kicking him in the knee. As Mel fell to the ground, wincing in pain, Trevor bolted to the front door like an Olympic sprinter. Just as Trevor made his exit, Bertha added a punctuation mark to the drunken debacle. "Call me, Tiger. We'll do DMV vixen." "So, the village tool is knocking up your girlfriend, huh?" Not quite the send-off Stephen was expecting from his stepfather. Stephen's adopted mom, Polly, had taken a more consoling approach. Polly preferred to smother Stephen with long hugs while whispering how the universe was going to take care of everything. She'd be still saying goodbye if her bladder hadn't pulled her away to the toilet. Stephen's taxidermist stepdad, Clancy, took the sandpaper soul approach, hollowed out by spending his days with the stiffs of the animal kingdom. He had disapproved of almost everything in Stephen's life, except Nicole. So it was no surprise Clancy found Stephen at fault for Nicole's cowboy riding. "Thanks for the sympathy, Clance," Stephen muttered. "I knew you'd blow it with the Johnson girl," Clancy gritted, while giving a dead deer a freelance prostate exam. "How hard is it to knock someone up?" "Thanks for the pep talk, Pops. Well, it's time to head out." "Hey, do you think I want to stick my hand up dead animals' butts all day at my age?" Clancy asked. Stephen looked around at the furry funeral parlor their garage had become, littered with wooden wildlife that had to listen to Clancy's rantings all day long. Then Stephen saw the sadness in Clancy's eyes, wondering what the future would have in store for him if he hadn't chosen a life of stuffing and mounting. Stephen tried to lighten the mood. But really, what age is ideal for feeling up wildlife? "Do you think this is the life I wanted for your mother and I? But I just wanted to follow my dreams to taxidermy school. If I would have stayed here, we could have owned this town." "Dad, if I stay here, I'll never be more than a redneck realtor." "You'll always be a redneck, Stephen. Only now, someone else has the deed to your girlfriend's heart." Stephen and Trevor couldn't make tracks out of St. Petersburg fast enough. But Clancy had left Stephen with one parting gift: a bow-tied, taxidermied raccoon. Stephen tossed it in the back of the family minivan and hightailed it out of town, nearly leaving the van's TAXIDRM vanity plate in the dust. Stephen and Trevor made a last stop outside of town at the Swifty Mart to stock up on supplies for the trip. Punjab Patel, the Hindu store clerk, greeted them with an accent as thick as his beard. The wise sage of discount depots dispensed advice as Trevor and Stephen stocked up on essentials like big chug slushy drinks, caramel ice cream bars, and Ms. Yummy's soft-baked chocolate chip cookies. "So, are you going to make carnal acquaintances with foxtail of the California variety?" Punjab asked, like a nosy neighbor more interested in your life than his own. "Punjab, I'm going there for work," Stephen replied, as Trevor raided the condom rack.
Of course, let me give you this advice, though. Do not be too quick to find a new woman that makes your heart say, holy cow! Marriage is a cricket bat to the nutsack. And don't you forget it, said the man who'd been married longer than Stephen was alive. That was the beauty of small-town life. Everyone knew your business, and everyone offered unsolicited advice on how to conduct that business. "I can't wait to get the hell out of this town," Stephen muttered, driving the final nail into his small-town life. It only took 5 minutes on the road for Stephen to realize how different Trevor's vision for this trip was than his. Stephen pictured it as a long-distance move with limited stops on the way. Trevor wanted to reinvent the map. "Dude, this is going to be like a pussy parade. Trust me. That she-bitch X will be a distant memory by the time we get our freak on in New Orleans," Trevor remarked, with the excitement of a kid on his way to a water park. "New Orleans? Are you high? We're going west, not south. Dude, we're going where the horny hotties take us." "No, we're going to California, with as few stops as possible. Damn, if we make good time, we can be in Kansas City tonight." "Right, because when I think of spring break, I think of Kansas City." "It's time to stop thinking with your brain and start thinking with your boner. We're living the dream, man. We can literally make up for lost debauchery. You think we're going to do that in Kansas City?" "I'm all for having fun. We just have to do it on schedule." "Sure. Why don't you schedule fun? Look, you don't have to be in California until the 25th, right? Well, at the absolute latest. But I was hoping..." "Fine. Leave the itinerary to me. But trust me, you'll get to your open house by the 25th. In the meantime, remember, it's all about the journey, not the destination. Now, let the vacation with benefits begin." Stephen didn't like the sound of that, and soon he realized why. Before Stephen even had the chance to settle into the right road music, Trevor elbowed him in the ribs to stop, but not just for any stop. It was for a Redneck Regatta. Houseboats were strewn as far as the eye could see, littering an entire lake like a floating trailer park. The twang of country western booze hounds would have been enough to put off most people, but Stephen had a history with Redneck Regattas. The last time Stephen had set foot on a houseboat, he found his dead father laying in a puddle of his own blood. Stephen had been haunted by the experience ever since. I mean, sure, the bastard was a punch-drunk, abusive deadbeat, but that didn't mean Hunk wanted to be the one to find the dirtbag shot on the floor in the back of the head. But typical Pat Foster, he was able to scar Stephen even from the afterlife. It was then Stephen's life changed forever, and if it weren't for his friend Jim, it most certainly would have been for the worse. "I can see the drunk chicks lowering their standards already," Trevor said gleefully. "No, we're not stopping," Stephen insisted. "Dude, what is it with you and houseboats? I don't want to talk about it. Let's just keep going, all right?" But Trevor didn't bite. "No, I'm not passing up perfectly horny drunk chicks without a good reason. What the hell happened on that rafting trip anyway?" Stephen had tried telling Trevor about the rafting trip 1,000 times, but he was afraid of opening up old wounds. He didn't want to revisit his forced removal from the Widow Thomas place only to live with his good-for-nothing father in the sticks. And he couldn't bring himself to tell Trevor how he'd escaped, like a jail-breaking prison, risking life and limb on the lam in the sticks. And he sure as hell hadn't told Trevor about finding out his father wasn't just a dipshit drunk, but also a petty thief, and a deadly bad one at that. Trevor had never understood Stephen and Jim's friendship. He didn't know the whole story, though. How Jim was a vacationing grief counselor, taking a trip down the Mississippi River to free him from the scars of his job, and how running across another grief-stricken boy like Stephen was the last thing Jim needed. But how Jim had such a huge heart that he helped Stephen work through his horrors and growing pains. How Stephen had gotten civilized that summer through no intent of his own. Stephen drifted off, caught up in the memories once again. When he came to, Trevor was by the edge of the lake already, plotting on how to join the Redneck Rager. "If you want to puss out in the car, fine. But I'm going booze cruising," Trevor yelled back at Stephen. Stephen looked out at the houseboats for once and saw them not as floating houses of horror, but as vessels of opportunity, a chance to heal his scars, to forge new memories, to drink off the demons, to cut loose, and maybe even have a good time. Stephen joined Trevor at the edge of the lake, finally ready to take a walk on the wild side. "Good to know you haven't lost all of your sack," Trevor remarked. "All right, Einstein, now what?" Stephen asked. And then opportunity literally knocked, or more appropriately, Trevor turned around after hearing the all-too-familiar metallic clatter of a beached beer keg. A drunk redneck lay passed out in the sand, leaving a good old boy hanging on to the keg alone. "Damn drunk," the good old boy bemoaned. Trevor turned to Stephen. "I say we lend a helping hand." "You guys are a keg saver," the good old boy declared, as Stephen and Trevor transferred the alcohol from a paddle boat onto one of the houseboats. "Let me know if there's anything I can do to thank you." A bikini babe cruised past Trevor on the deck. "You already have," Trevor said. Before the good old boy had a chance to answer, Trevor was already tailing the bikini babe like a dog in heat. "Marking his territory," Stephen quipped. "Does he piss on fire hydrants, too?" Stephen cackled as the good old boy tapped the keg, and Stephen thought it wasn't such a bad idea after all. Trevor meanwhile had no time to think, only to chase tail, but Cindy Sue had other ideas. The loaded lush, already more tipsy than the Leaning Tower of Pisa, plowed into Trevor, spilling what was left of her booze on Trevor's shirt. "Derek," Cindy Sue slurred, as she squinted like a woman who'd lost her contact lenses. "I haven't seen you since the demolition derby. Dang, you were a wreck." It had become clear, in Cindy Sue's drunken stupor, that she had mistaken Trevor's identity for that of a more pint-sized pal. "Looks like you went and had a growth spurt," Cindy Sue slurred on. "Wonder if you've grown in all the right areas." No sooner did Trevor have a chance to say, I think you have me confused with someone else," than Cindy Sue grabbed Trevor's crotch. "And I think you have me confused with a moron," Cindy Sue remarked, seeming to think Trevor was playing hard to get. "You think I don't recognize that man who stuffed me like a turkey on Thanksgiving?" And for once, Trevor shelved his inner horn dog. "Don't get me wrong. That sounds delicious, but I think you may have had a little too much to drink." "Don't be redonkulous. I'm just drunk enough to give our crazy Romeo and Juliet story another try." Juliet. It's Julie. Now you listen to me, Trailer Nova. I don't care how sweet your sugar stick is. We ain't having a threesome with no Juliet." Trevor started to wonder how he got stuck in such a star-crossed identity tragedy. "I think you need to get off your feet," Trevor remarked, worrying she'd topple over. "Maybe lay down a while." "Derek, you couldn't sweep a woman off her feet with a broom," Cindy said in her best seductive slur. "I am kind of hankering to get laid, though. So what say we get you out of those clothes?" Stephen had his own problems, haunted no longer by the ghosts of his father, but his ex-girlfriend. "We were together 5 years, and she just dumps me for some rodeo clown," Stephen lamented to Tanya, a redneck reveler all too familiar with the role of romantic roadkill. "That's terrible," Tanya replied, putting down a drink almost as fast as Stephen. "Worst part is, she dumped me over text message." "Yeah, well, my ex dumped me on live TV," Tanya remarked, recalling her daytime talk show fiasco. "Damn, what are a couple of broken hearts to do?" "I think I have an idea," Tanya said, with the mischievous smile of someone that had a different kind of party in mind. Cindy Sue corralled Trevor below deck into a kitsch paradise. Lawn gnomes, plastic flamingos, hula dancer clocks. If it was too embarrassing to sell at a garage sale, it was there. Trevor got caught up looking at the tacky temple as Cindy Sue pushed him onto a bobble-headed littered couch. "Derek, remember that time I caught you humping my reflection at the House of Mirrors? You're always the romantic type," Cindy Sue said without a hint of irony. Trevor winced. then realized he was sitting on a sword-wielding bobblehead. "For the last time, I'm not Derek," Trevor declared. But Cindy Sue just ignored him. "Hey, you want a drink?" she asked, already stammering to the kitchenette. "No, and you should probably pass, too," Trevor said, playing the role of the responsible one for once in his life. "There you go, Derek, talking crazy again," Cindy Sue slurred, before tripping over a coffee table. She falls to the ground. "Damn, that coffee table came out of nowhere." Trevor scrambled back over to check on Cindy Sue, but she popped up as if nothing happened. "No worries," Cindy Sue stated. "I've taken bigger spills in the sack. I think I'll pass on that drink, though." "Good idea," Trevor muttered under his breath. "Besides, I'm feeling hungry anyway," Cindy Sue said, as she throws herself at Trevor. Before Trevor knew it, Cindy Sue was mounting him on the couch, sucking on his lip like a vacuum cleaner. "Don't forget to save room for dessert," Trevor said, pushing her away. "Dessert? Good idea." Cindy Sue got on her knees and unzipped Trevor's pants. Trevor's sex drive then overtook his sense of responsibility. "Derek, whoever you are, thank you," Trevor said to himself. Trevor closed his eyes, BJ fully on the brain, but his boner had to wait. Cindy Sue?" Trevor said, to no response. Trevor opened his eyes to find Cindy Sue passed out on his lap. "Talk about blowing a great opportunity," Trevor remarked before nudging Cindy Sue awake. Cindy Sue slowly opened her eyes and squinted at Trevor. "But it's nap time." "Nope, it's naughty time," Trevor replied, just as Cindy Sue began to heave. Cindy Sue then threw up in Trevor's lap. "Whoa, that daiquiri sure tasted a lot worse on the way back up." Stephen found himself in an uncomfortable situation of his own, cramped on the toilet in the Houseboat spare bathroom, with Tanya's tongue down his throat. Timing truly was everything. Tanya was a redneck sexbot, the type of woman normally way out of Stephen's league. And if Stephen hadn't had his heart trampled on just the day before by his longtime love, he would have more than welcomed a hookup with a hottie like that. But the wounds were too fresh, and Stephen's heart was too hamstrung to be on the rebound so soon. "I don't know if this is the best idea," Stephen said, having let booze get the best of his better judgment. "I just got dumped yesterday, and I'm kind of fragile. Not to mention—" "Hey, tonsil jockey," Tanya quipped, like a woman not willing to be denied. "I got a better use for that tongue of yours." Tanya lifted her skirt and gave Stephen a come-hither look. "Whoa," Stephen remarked, taken back by the no-nonsense approach to Nookie. "I'm not going to lick it myself," Tanya said, growing impatient, "although I'm sure you'd enjoy that." Stephen wasn't ready for this, neither a meaningless fling nor the sight he saw in front of him. But as Stephen stared and drifted to thoughts about what Nicole was doing that second, Tanya was none too content of having her skirt up with nothing to show for it. She cleared her throat. "Is something the matter?" Tanya asked. "It's just that you have some strange bumps down there," Stephen replied, trying to be diplomatic about the curious-looking bumps on Tanya's inner thigh. "Oh, those. Don't worry. That's just a few herpes warts," Tanya dismissed nonchalantly. "I'm sorry, did you just say herpes?" Stephen asked, popping back up on his feet in a hurry. "Oh, come on, it's not a big deal," Tanya declared. "You act like you've never seen herpes warts." And suddenly it became clear why a woman so out of Stephen's league so aggressively put the moves on him after such a brief introduction. Desperation did crazy things to people, and Stephen was only starting to realize how desperate Tanya really was. "Well, if that kind of nothingness frazzles your razzle, I should tell you I also happen to have a mild case of syphilis," Tanya revealed, "and a dash of chlamydia. The doctor says I'm a regular potpourri of STDs." This was not the reintroduction to single scenes that Stephen needed. It was more like a crash course in crass. "So, who's down for some sex? I'll make it extra kinky," Tanya continued, realizing how quickly the prospects of sex had dwindled for her. But Stephen couldn't get out of that bathroom fast enough. Too fast, in fact, as Stephen opened the door in his own face. But as Stephen made his slapdash, slapstick exit, Tanya took a seat on the toilet and lamented to herself, "It's been nothing but trouble since that conjugal visit." As Stephen rejoined the party deck, he soon realized he wasn't the only one experiencing houseboat hell. And as he came across Trevor in just his tighty-whities with his vomit-soaked clothes on the ground, it was clear any hope for redneck revelry was sunk. Chapter 3. The Irony of Intercourse. You wouldn't expect a town named Intercourse to be the barn-raising, horse-and-buggy center of the Amish universe. Yet, there Trevor and Stephen stood, in the middle of Intercourse town square, the butt of a cosmic practical joke of epic cock-teasing proportion. This is what Stephen had been afraid of. His simple cross-country move derailed by fruitless attempts to get laid. "It's the kinky capital of the world," Trevor had said. "Triple X marking the spot. A place with more horny pussy than a gaggle of bridesmaids." It was also 2 hours out of Stephen's way. But after being scared by fresh new houseboat horrors, Stephen was itching for the good time that Trevor had promised. "Are you shitting out of my ass?" Trevor screamed, outraged at the bucolic bastion of Puritanism in front of him. Trevor and Stephen stuck out like Goths at Happy Land, two heathens among the holy. "This'll be a real quickie, all right," Stephen quipped, more outraged by the time they had to make up than the lost sex. "This makes the agriculture club look like a rave." No, there's something wrong here," Trevor proclaimed, pulling out his map. "Yeah, we're stuck in 1839. Ezekiel, an Amish elder with a beard as long as his stern face, strolled by with a hoe in his hand, and not even an ankle showing under his all-black get-up. "Hey, repressed dude," Trevor called out. "This is Intercourse, right?" Ezekiel looked at Trevor and Stephen like they were as foreign to him as albino Siamese twins. He deadpanned. "Not from around here, are you?" "Nice call. What are you, Einstein?" Ezekiel gave Trevor a blank stare as Stephen took a more civil approach. "Excuse my horny, tactless friend. We were just wondering, is it always so Amish around here?" "This is Amish country, son," Ezekiel declared, looking at Trevor and Stephen like they were complete morons. "But what about the kinky sex?" Trevor pleaded, desperate. "What me and my wife do in the privacy of our own home is no business of yours," Ezekiel replied, offended. "Though I do like to wheelbarrow her." Trevor and Stephen looked ready to projectile vomit. "Here comes my life of celibacy," Stephen quipped after dry heaving. "You boys enjoy your stay," Ezekiel continued, already walking away. "If you'll excuse me, I have to be getting to the hoe and hand plow depot." And like that, Trevor and Stephen were back on the road, horny as hell, taking their frustrations out on each other. Stephen jabbed first. "Stop an intercourse, you say? A pussy parade. A regular kinky carnival. How was I supposed to know geography knows irony?" Trevor defended himself as the van passed a group of Amish kids. "Look at those poor bastards. They don't even know the joy of masturbating on a waterbed." Stephen sneered at Trevor. "Or, indoor plumbing," Stephen said. Trevor and Stephen then found themselves distracted by an Amish boy hitchhiking alongside the van. Stephen started to pull over. "Dude, you gotta be kidding me," Trevor said, freaking out. "This isn't the 60s. You never pick up hitchhikers. Unless they're smoking hot." "Yeah, because I'm sure he's a serial killer." "Stephen, have you ever watched a horror movie? That little dude is bad news." "Look, we're really far out of town. Maybe he's lost." "Don't be such a douche. We escaped. You don't go back to the House of Horrors. Maybe he's looking to join the new millennium. We could drop him off at the next Sir Gorgelot, and he can get culture shock and calorie shock all at once. Stephen rolled the window down and talked to the Amish boy. You need a ride? Yes, sir, the boy replied. I would very much appreciate it. The boy climbed into the back seat while Trevor looked at him like an apprentice axe murderer. Thank you kindly, good sir, the boy said, as the van pulled back onto the road. So, kid, where are you going? Trevor asked in the tone of a police interrogator. Can you please just drive as far away as possible? The boy insisted. I hear you, kid, Trevor said, finding common ground to rant about. We were only there for 5 minutes, and I'm all ready to wear out my porn pod. You know, they should really change the name of your town to something more appropriate, like Blue Balls. Coming up, the boy replied. Trevor and Stephen looked on, confused. Blue Balls, the boy continued, as he points to a sign by the side of the road that read, Welcome to Blue Balls. Trevor looked on, wide-eyed. It's like a different country. That's Amish country for you, the boy said, not getting the point. I never thought I'd say this, but you need this more than I do, Trevor remarked, pulling out his multimedia player. Stephen looked away from the road to scold Trevor. What the hell is wrong with you? You can't give a porn pod to a kid. Trevor looked out at the road and panicked. Dude, not really the time for this. Shut up, Stephen interrupted. But dude, Trevor insisted. No, you have to hear this, Trevor. Do the world a favor and never have kids. Please. Matter of fact, start wearing 2 condoms from now on. I can't believe it. You actually gave a porn pod to a kid. Dude, Trevor quipped. What? Stephen asked. Trevor pointed to the middle of the road where a horse-drawn buggy was parked. Stephen slammed on the brake and stopped just in time. Son of a bitch, Stephen proclaimed, inches from disaster. Trevor panted and clutched his chest. My life just flashed before my eyes. I have to do more doggy style. Stephen still tried to catch his breath, as Trevor whirled around to the boy in the back seat. Damn it, kid! What the hell is wrong with your people? Trevor scolded. Amish boy shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly, which just angered Trevor more. Stephen, meanwhile, was focused on the trouble afoot at the buggy. Dude, we got a problem, Stephen said, staring out the front of the van. Another horse-drawn buggy then came out of the woods and stopped behind Stephen's minivan, blocking him in. I can see that, Trevor remarked, seeing they were boxed in. Stephen watched Jebediah, a burly, no-bull, middle-aged Amish man, get out of the buggy in front of the minivan. Meanwhile, Atticus, another Amish badass, got out of the other buggy. Both brandished a farmer's hoe and hard stares. Friends of yours, kid? Stephen asked sheepishly. That's my daddy, the boy remarked. Yeah, well, someone should teach your daddy how to drive, Trevor quipped. Trevor then rolled down the window and yelled at Jebediah. What the fuck, Jethro Dull? You almost killed us. Finch, thank God you're safe, Jebediah said, ignoring Trevor completely. These heathens haven't harmed you, have they? No, Papa, the boy replied. Jebediah then turned his glare to Trevor and Stephen, while Atticus brandished his hoe menacingly. You sin chasers have a lot of nerve kidnapping my boy like that, Jebediah snapped. Stephen tried to defuse the situation. Hey, the kid was hitchhiking. We were just helping him out. Good Samaritan-like. Is that true, Finch? Jebediah asked. The Amish boy's demeanor completely changes. He put on a scared look and pulled a crackly voice out. Oh, no, Papa. They took me. I was so scared they were going to kill me and feed me to other heathen cannibals. Trevor snapped. Cannibals? What? You little brat. What are you doing? I'm going to kill you. Trevor goes to lunge toward the Amish boy. Trevor, not helping, Stephen remarked, seeing Atticus' tight grip on the hoe. Trevor composed himself. Right. Just kidding. Trevor put on a forced smile. Jebediah motioned to Atticus. Atticus, fetch the sheriff, Jebediah said, then turned to Trevor and Stephen. You horsemen of the apocalypse are going to jail for a long, long time. But we didn't do anything, Stephen pleaded. Yeah, the kid's lying, Trevor added. Oh, come on, kid. I was going to give you my porn pod. But the Amish boy didn't cave, and neither did Jebediah or Atticus. So this is how it would end. Stephen held up at hoe point, soiling himself, running afoul of angry Amish antagonizers. What an ironic end, to be arrested in blue balls when you were looking for intercourse. But Trevor wasn't going to give up without sniveling. Look, weird dude, I'm way too carved to go to jail, Trevor pleaded. They're going to pass me around like the cell block bitch. That's not the kind of butt sex I'm after, man. Should have thought about that before you kidnapped my boy, Jebediah warned sternly. There's nothing I can do. Unless... What? Stephen asked, desperate. Name it. We'll do it. Jebediah smiled. All of that for a space heater? That's right. The Amish ambush was just a con to sell their miracle space heaters. Talk about high-pressure sales. But the boys in black got what they wanted. Stephen and Trevor made room for the newly purchased heater in the back of the van, relieved not to be spending the night in the slammer, while Jebediah reveled in his big payday. And like that, Trevor and Stephen were done chasing intercourse. A hushed silence pervaded the van as they made their way to the nearest motel to rest and recuperate before losing the light. But the area surrounding Blue Balls offered limited hospitality. Stephen pulled into a roach coach motel with a crackling, half-lit neon sign and started giving thought to sleeping in the van. Look at this hole. This is the only place where an axe murderer comes with every room service order, Trevor complained, looking at the motel sign advertising color TV as an amenity. It's the only motel within 50 miles of here, Stephen sighed, while looking at an online travel guide on his smartphone. Damn, I bet even the cockroaches are suing for substandard living, Trevor continued. Hey, I wasn't the one who needed intercourse. The room was even trashier than Trevor and Stephen had worried. The kind of place that could only stay in business because they were the only game in town. The mattress was bed bug central, while the TV is on the fritz. The faucets were leaky, and the ceiling looked ready to collapse. Stephen and Trevor brought sleeping bags in from the van to not directly touch the comforter. Luckily, it was just for one night. Stephen came out of the bathroom with a map in his hand, while Trevor distracted himself from the wretched room with his porn pod. We're going to have to haul ass like a cheetah on meth, but I think we can make it to Topeka by tomorrow night, Stephen remarked, optimistic. Trevor kept watching his porn pod. Trevor, can you stop watching porn for 5 seconds? Stephen continued. Trevor tore himself away from his porn to snap at Stephen. Never come between a dude and his girl on girl. Trevor rubbed the pod. Bro, this is important. Stephen, I already know the itinerary tomorrow. Next stop, Nudist Town. Right, because intercourse was just a bone a minute. Hey, at least you got a space heater out of it. Usually after intercourse, you just get some weepy chick looking to talk about her feelings. Look, we're sticking to the itinerary, Trevor snapped. Bro, why are you in such a hurry to get rid of me? Have you forgotten who was there for your first keg stand? Who your wingman was when you snagged your first lay? Who carried your choking ass through the Tri-County Bong Pong Championship? Dude, I told you not to leave that egg salad in the sun. It really F's with your mind. But after a day of close calls and blue balls, Trevor was in no mood for wisecracks. You just don't get it, do you, Stephen? This trip is about boozing and banging across the country with your best bro before he forgets about you. You think I'm going to forget about a guy who can't count neither the number of chicks he's hooked up with nor the number of times he's had his stomach pump on one hand? You kidding? The minute you get a taste of those California chicks, you'll be too busy drooling like a basset hound to ever catch a flight back to Missouri. And how am I supposed to fly my broke ass out to California? So this is it, bro. One final hangover hurrah. The road trip to put all the others to rest. Our sexual swan song. Stephen had assumed Trevor was using the trip as an excuse to make up for lost sex. That St. Petersburg was too small to contain his sex drive. That the trip was just more of Trevor's mischief madness. That while Stephen was using this trip to write a eulogy to his relationship's demise, Trevor had bigger plans. Plans for one last hurrah. Plans to tell Stephen in his own misguided way how much he'd miss him. Plans to say goodbye. Stephen looked at the map in a new light. and then at Trevor, eagerly awaiting an answer. Stephen tossed the map to the side. "You're right," Stephen proclaimed. "I've been so caught up with Nicole and saying goodbye to the rest of the town that I forgot about you. But this is our time, our chance. So let's tap this country like a keg." "That's right. Next stop, Nudist Town."
Chapter 4. The Nincompoop and the Nudist Beauty Queen. If Nudist Town proved anything, it was that you didn't have to be wearing clothes to have tricks up your sleeve. Trevor and Stephen swooped into town, figuring it would be a bear-all buffet of beauties. The kind of place, showing so much fabulous flesh, it could put a strip club out of business. But they soon found out they had front-row seats to small-town treachery. But the town hid it well. Nudist Town looked a lot like St. Petersburg, a red-brick-dominated main drag, bungalow-lined streets with maple trees and picket fences out front, and a town square where everyone gossiped about your business. Trevor was more eager to get into his birthday suit, but with the prospect of a flesh fest, Stephen followed. Nothing quite prepared them for the mound of flabby meat they encountered. It was a flesh fest already, a parade of shirtless fat guys with way too much bravado, the man-boob epicenter of the universe. There were beauties bearing all. They were just fewer and further between than in Trevor's fantasies. Still, any bear-all babes were better than nothing. But Trevor and Stephen soon found that there was more afoot than just an orgy of erogyny. Trevor and Stephen unexpectedly arrived during the town's Founders' Day festivities, where the public drama was doled out. It started out simply enough, with the nudist mayor at the podium, boring the revelers with a history lesson. Even the mayor's former beauty queen wife and current gown and sash-wearing daughter looked on with heavy eyelids. But then the mayor peppered his speech with an impromptu announcement that his daughter was getting married. And by the look on the new Miss Nudist's face, she was just as surprised as everyone else by the news. But the real whopper came when the mayor announced who his daughter was getting hitched to: the police chief's Nincompoop's son. The nudist police chief beamed with pride while his intellectually dwarfed offspring toppled the ice cream from his cone in shock. It was a classic hidden camera show moment, only with no cameras and no laugh track. Trevor scoped out the Miss Nudist, then her new numbnuts fiancé, and slapped on a grin as wide as the Mississippi. "Damn, if that tool can get laid, this is going to be a sex fest," Trevor reveled, as he pulled out a ream of condoms. "Good thing I brought the 36-pack. The Founders' Day festival was in full swing with a pie-eating competition, three-legged races, and a packed dance floor. But as Trevor returned from the porta-potty to see Stephen stretch, it became clear that they had a different approach for the day. "You're stretching? Dude, did Nicole ever polish your knob?" Trevor asked. "Shut up, Trevor," Stephen replied. "Damn, man, I just dropped the deuce and you're here dropping giving me 20. Trevor then put on his game face. "Now, don't forget, when we get out on the dance floor, that you're my wingman, which means I get first dibs. But don't worry, I'll try to scrounge up some tasty leftovers for you. I know how to pick up a woman," Stephen replied, insulted. "Oh, I forgot. You're a Bonosaurus Rex, conquering all chicks in your path. By the way, you think Nicole's knocked up yet?" "Suck my dick. I'd have to find it first. Now come on. I can smell the desperation in the air." "I'll catch up with you later." "Right. Gotta finish limbering up. Wouldn't want to pull a hammy out there." So much for brocation bonding. Trevor disappeared like a horny Houdini as Stephen finished his stretching. But Stephen had a score to settle with the past. While most kids spent their youth getting a participatory T-ball trophies and eating orange slices on the soccer sidelines, Stephen was trapped at home dodging empty beer cans and verbal jabs from his good-for-nothing father. But Stephen's hardware drought followed him into adulthood. He'd never won a trophy of any kind. Even when he joined the realty biz, Saul McSale had always overtook him for the top prize. Nicole, meanwhile, had a trophy for everything. She lined her room with them like wallpaper.
equestrian, cow milking, pig racing, softball, soccer, you name it. She won it. Stephen was convinced if he looked hard enough, he would find a trophy for having the most trophies. So, when Stephen spotted the Founders Day Nudist Cup trophy, the long, dormant flame of competition ignited in his soul. Stephen wanted that trophy. He wanted the closure, and he was determined to get it. But it seemed Stephen wasn't the only one with unresolved issues. As Stephen stretched, the mayor, his trophy wife, and their newly engaged daughter Melinda were in the midst of a total meltdown at a neighboring picnic table.
"I don't care what you say, Daddy," Melinda yelled. "I'm not marrying a guy who gave himself the nickname Judge, Jury, and Sexecutioner."
"So he's not going to win an intelligence contest," the mayor conceded. "He did get a degree from that online university. And look, I'm in public office. Trust me, intelligence is overrated."
"Daddy, the man sleeps with a hunting rifle," Melinda argued, as the trophy wife just smiles politely, refusing to take a side.
At least you'll be safe," the mayor continued.
"Didn't he shoot himself in the ass last year?"
The mayor glossed over his daughter's response and continued with his line of arguing. "Sweetie, he comes from a great family. Why don't you give a try for a while? Who knows? You may not even hate him too much."
The tool in question strutted over with his newfound swagger and an ice cream stain on his shirt. "What do you say we start the honeymoon early?" Judd asked Melinda. Judd added a pelvic thrust to punctuate his douchiness. Melinda slapped Judd in the face, then glared at her father before dashing off. Judd rubbed his face and misinterpreted the slap. "Oh, so you're into the kinky shit. Me likes." Stephen decided to make tracks on his own, but not before catching the stolen glances of the mayor's trophy wife. For the first time in his life, Trevor realized trouble was sometimes more than happy finding him. At the Nudist festival, that trouble was Melinda sticking her tongue down Trevor's throat on the dance floor while her disapproving father looked on. "Damn, I didn't even have to get you drunk," Trevor remarked, surprised as Melinda came up for air. "What can I say?" "I had the sudden urge to suck your face," Melinda replied, grinding up on Trevor in plain view of her father's unapproving glare. "I've been telling myself that I should sell my musk on the open market," Trevor bragged. Then Trevor caught the sight of Melinda's supposed fiancé swinging and wildly missing a piñata in the distance. "Don't get me wrong. I love a good game of tonsil hockey," Trevor continued. "But aren't you supposed to be engaged?" Melinda looked awkwardly over at Judd, letting the piñata play him for a fool. That was a gross misunderstanding," Melinda insisted. But that wasn't the only misunderstanding. While Trevor and Melinda used the dance floor as their own public make-out party, the town's police chief approached Melinda's father with a bone to pick. "I thought we had a deal," the chief snapped at the meek mayor.
"Oh, we do," the mayor insisted. "Melinda's just checking that guy's tonsils. Yeah, I'm thinking of sending her to dental school."
"Remember," the chief warned, "if your daughter and my son don't get hitched, I'll find it mighty hard to ignore a little transgression with a particular nudist of the night." Police chief nudged to a nudist prostitute flirting with a septuagenarian at the park bus stop. The mayor started to sweat. He wiped his brow, then put on his best serious voice.
"I wouldn't bet against me in the next election."
Melinda saw her father edging his way through the dance crowd towards herself and Trevor. She pulled back from Trevor and asked seductively, "What do you say we go somewhere a little more private?"
"Damn, you're feistier than a cougar at a cocktail party," Trevor quipped, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him.
Trevor whisked Melinda off as the mayor was caught between waltzers. The police chief looked on and glared. Turns out you couldn't win the Nudist Cup without making enemies in the process. Of course, Stephen didn't know that. All he cared about was his trophy, the shining symbol of validation he'd craved since childhood. He stopped off at the local bar, a saloon-themed hole-in-the-wall, to celebrate. With the Founders Day festivities at fever pitch, Stephen had to brace himself. All Stephen wanted was a victory shot, but a posse of nudist punks were itching to sour the sweet victory. "All right, dickwad, hand over the trophy and no one gets hurt," Ralph threatened, strutting into the joint with a swagger of someone twice his dick size. Ralph had taken defeat the worst, desperate to claim the cup after 4 years of Founders Day futility.
And with the nudist nightmare, his greatest rival, ravaged by rickets, Ralph assumed it would be his year until Stephen came along, so Ralph had a score to settle. Never mind that Stephen had played fair. Ralph was rabid for that trophy, regardless of whether he'd earned it. But Stephen held on to the prize like a kid with a new toy. "Don't worry," Stephen whispered to the trophy. "You're leaving with me." "Don't make me pull out a can of whoop-ass," Ralph warned, refusing to back down. "Why are you talking to me like I boned your sister in a past life?" Stephen asked, confused about the hostility. Oh, it's so on now, dickwad. That's my trophy. Now either you hand it over, or I'll pry it from your cold, dead hands. The bartender offered up a free round of drinks to ease the tension, but Stephen wasn't about to give up his sense of validation. "I don't know how many hamsters you got crawling up your ass, but you'd better piss off, or you're going to pay for it," Stephen snapped. Ralph sneered, with one last trick up his sleeve. "Boys, it's brawling time." Nudists started coming out of the woodwork. 2 entered the bar behind Ralph, 2 came out of the restroom, and 2 came out of the supply closet. And suddenly, Stephen was surrounded. The nudists charged Stephen and dogpiled on him, burying Stephen under a mound of flesh. "Hey, this isn't fair," Stephen pleaded. Ralph grabbed the trophy from the ground beside the dogpile and lamented to himself. "I could have been a contender, butt munch. I could have had my own bobblehead. I could have gotten chicks to stop laughing in my general direction. I could have had my picture in the paper for something other than disorderly conduct. Instead, I'm just a bum clowning your pathetic ass. See what you made me do?" Trevor had his own problems. Sure, Melinda was proof that multiple orgasms did exist, but the following pillow talk was enough to make Trevor jump out of the barn loft they were laying in. "Guess that means we'll have to get married," Melinda said, rocking Trevor to his core. "What?" Trevor questioned, completely flummoxed. "In nudist culture, if a couple is caught having premarital sex, the man must marry the woman, or have his balls cut off and fed to wild boars," Melinda continued. Trevor looked down at his crotch in a panic. "Don't worry, Blinky and Seamus. I won't let that happen to you," Trevor remarked to his sack in all seriousness. "I was just kidding," Melinda cracked, much to Trevor's delight. "Oh, thank God. I can't die. I haven't even had sex with an alpaca farmer yet," Trevor cracked. "Seriously, though," Melinda declared, "if my dad finds out about this, he'll kill you with his vintage Civil War musket." "Let's not tell your father about this, then." "Well, if you and I got married, I wouldn't have to." "Whoa, you're freaking me out." "Oh, wait, I get it. You're kidding again," Trevor remarked as he laughed nervously. "Look, you're going to Vegas. They have plenty of quickie chapels. Or, if you're going through Utah, we could stop at the circus. I know a lion tamer with an online ministry license." "Holy shit, you're not just messing with me. I haven't been this tripped out since doing shrooms with that mortician." Trevor jumped up and moved to bolt, tired of treading water in the deep end. "Look, so you don't want to marry me after knowing me for an hour. Fine. At least take me with you, though. You can drop me off in Vegas, or Topeka even." That was not the no-string sex and see you later that Trevor had hoped for. That was a cry for help, a woman in need, and the last thing Trevor could handle. "Look, if I stay, I'll have to marry Dummy Crockett," Melinda continued. "I'll turn to bingo night for comfort, and pop horse tranquilizers like breath mints. So please, just take me with you." "Has your daddy been dumping LSD in the water supply or something?" Trevor cracked. Melinda was in no mood for jokes, though. "You don't understand what it's like being trapped in a no-future town." But that's one of the few things Trevor did understand. "Are you kidding?" Trevor remarked. "Why do you think I took this trip? To get as far away from my one-whore town as possible. And don't think I'm ever going back." "So you'll take me with you then?" Melinda replied, with a sense of renewed joy. Melinda thought she'd found a kindred spirit, someone who understood her pain, someone who could ease it. But deep in farm country, Trevor had too many wild oats to sow. "No offense, but I'm traveling light, and this town seems to be full of baggage," Trevor added. "How's this for no offense?" Melinda deadpanned, resigned. "If you swing by the circus in Utah, ask for Alana. Tell her Melinda referred you personally." That's just the way Trevor liked it. No hard feelings. No feelings at all. And no sooner did Melinda say it than Trevor was out the door. Stephen awakened, sore and strung out on a billiards table with the nudist cup and posse nowhere in sight. He rolled over and saw Vicky, the mayor's trophy wife that had been stealing glances of him. She sat on the edge of the table with her legs crossed seductively and a cigarette between her lips. "Who's Nicole?" Vicky asked,
taking a puff. "What?" Stephen replied, still trying to get his bearings. "You kept calling for her in your sleep." Stephen had a pounding headache, radiating from an unfamiliar bump on the top of his head. "Oh, she's my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, really. Didn't know you could be both." "She was my girlfriend until 2 days ago when I caught her cheating on me with a porta-potty salesman," Stephen deadpanned. "Wow, you're taking it much better than I did." "Wait, someone actually cheated on you?" Stephen asked, incredulous that a sexpot like Vicky would have trouble finding a man to be faithful. "My husband," Vicky lamented. "Only he was only my boyfriend at the time." "But if he cheated on you, why would you take him back?" "I was young and dumb enough to believe it was a one-time misfire. Besides, I had a baby on the brain. But mostly, I was in love with him. And I didn't realize until much too late that he wasn't in love with me. He still isn't. And the crazy thing is, I don't think he's ever stopped cheating on me." Vicky looked like she needed to be held, comforted, like she was ready to implode, having held on to soul-crushing truths far too long. Stephen didn't mean to pry, but having had his heart just ripped out, he wondered how anyone volunteered for another go-round. "Then why are you still with him?" Stephen asked. "Are you kidding? Look at me. If my own husband doesn't want me, who would?" Stephen wished he could put a mirror up to Vicky's face. She was a classic beauty, her pageant-winning looks still not faded, even after all those years. Vicky was the kind of woman who could light up a room, with luscious lips, cascading blonde hair, and welcoming brown eyes. But she didn't see it. Vicky had let her insecurities get the best of her. But Stephen wasn't about to let her get away without knowing the truth. "You are a beautiful, beautiful woman," Stephen remarked. "Your husband doesn't know what he's missing." Vicky looked deep into Stephen's eyes and heard the honesty in his voice. Stephen had no reason to lie, nothing to gain. He just told the truth, and Vicky was more than eager to listen. She twisted the wedding ring on her finger around and around like a nervous tick, pensive, contemplative. Vicky couldn't remember the last time she'd been complimented like that, and it was exactly what she needed to hear. Vicky pulled the ring off and set it down on the pool table. "You're right," Vicky declared. "I need to find someone who appreciates me, someone sweet and kind." Vicky looked deeper and deeper into Stephen's eyes, and for the first time since the breakup, Stephen was able to look at another woman without being reminded of Nicole. Stephen saw Vicky for the beauty she was. Vicky leaned in for a kiss. Stephen got the butterflies in his stomach, like being back in adolescence again. Then Vicky kissed Stephen on the forehead. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're going to make some woman really happy." Vicky then got up and left without her ring, walking out to find a man that would finally make her happy. And like that, the trip to Nudist Town wasn't a total loss. Still, Stephen was happy, knowing he'd never come back. Chapter 5. Curry Kebabs and the Saucy Sea Wench. Stephen could never look at tartar sauce the same again. That's what happened when you caught your best friend jerking off to a tartar sauce company's cartoon mascot. Stephen was halfway to the diner across the street from his hotel when he realized he'd forgotten his wallet back in the room. But when Stephen returned to the room, he found Trevor half under the bedsheets, one hand on a jar of tartar sauce and the other on his joystick. "Oh, yeah, Auntie Annabelle, I've been so naughty, and I'm going to need a spanking. Come on, you saucy sea wench. Give it to me, give it to me," Trevor moaned as he oogled Auntie Annabelle, the sauce company's cartoon Victoria-era British mascot. Trevor did little to defuse the following awkward meal by ordering fish and chips. "Oh, God, Auntie Annabelle? The tartar sauce sea wench?" Stephen asked, while scanning the diner, wondering what other condiments turned Trevor on. "What can I say? I love a luscious limey," Trevor replied without skipping a beat. "There goes my appetite." "Step off. It's my spankiversary." "Your what?" Stephen questioned. "Spankiversary. You know, the anniversary of the day I first spanked it." That was what always happened with Trevor. He was a man-child that knew no bounds. The kind of guy that grew older, yet never grew up. And despite the excitement he could bring to your life, he never knew where to draw the line. The sad thing was, Stephen and Trevor were finally starting to reconnect. During the Nicole era,
Stephen barely made a cameo in the story of Trevor's delinquency. But on the trip, Trevor and Stephen were making up for lost immaturity. Car karaoke, impromptu fart symphonies, and rampant name-calling carried the day. But Stephen hadn't realized how much he missed his old friend. But there was always another antic around every corner, and at the restaurant table, all Stephen could think about was how bad he felt for the fictional corporate mascot. "You're crazier than Leonard Johnson," Stephen cracked, "and he lights firecrackers in his ass." "Hey, it's a very important day in a young boy's life," Trevor insisted. "Dude, you forgot Polly's birthday last year." "But then I took her to Sir Gorge-a-Lot, and all was awesome again." "You're so effed up. Who remembers the first time they spanked it?" "Oh, I'll never forget. I was 11 years old, watching a Teenage Mutant Ninja Squirrel cartoon. And then the Auntie Annabelle commercial came on, where the pirate is trying to pilfer her tangy sauce. Remember? The captain says, 'I'd throw my first mate overboard for sauce this good.'" Stephen rolled his eyes. "Hey, I went overboard for Belle that day," Stephen beamed. "I don't know if it was the accent or the hint of animated Victoria-era bosom, but I got harder than that pirate ship's plank. So I went into the bathroom, took care of business. Now every year to the day, I recreate the magic." Stephen only had one thing to say. "You need so much therapy." But Trevor needed more than that. Whereas once they were two peas in the same prankster pod, it was clear time had different futures planned for Trevor and Stephen. And not just because they were going to be living in different parts of the country. They had become complete opposites. One barreled the road of excess, the other looked for a shortcut to the palace of wisdom. Stephen wondered sometimes, had they not grown up, spent their formative years and manufactured mischief together, would they have even been friends? The truth was, they'd always be friends and family. They'd always have the past in common, but did they have a future together? Or were they going to part ways at the end of the trip, their better days behind them, promising to keep in touch, only to rarely hear from each other again? Stephen wasn't sure. All he knew was he loved the karaoke, the war of wits, the excitement Trevor could bring to a day. He just didn't know how much longer he could stomach the bitter aftertaste of Trevor's shenanigans. If the tartar sauce shenanigans were an appetizer, then kinky airport security sex was the main course. Albeit unexpected, Trevor and Stephen returned to their room with full stomachs, but soon wanted to lose their lunch as they walked in on two strangers deep in disturbing sexual role play. Isabel, a hunky housewife in her 40s, played the role of the no-nonsense airport security officer, while frisking Larry, a middle-aged mess of meat stripping off his tax lawyer work outfit in favor of just tidy-whities. It was a chubby chaser's paradise. Like watching drunk manatees mate. Trevor and Stephen wanted to gouge their eyes out with sporks. "I love it when you frisk me," Larry flirted, unaware of Trevor and Stephen's presence. "Then you're really gonna love the strip search. It's gonna be full cavity," Isabel bragged. "I wouldn't want it any other way," Larry insisted. Isabel then pushed Larry on the bed and mounted him, while Trevor and Stephen tried their best to keep their lunches in their stomachs. Go figure. There is something more disturbing than an Auntie Annabelle spank job, Stephen cringed. And for a moment at least, the all-you-can-eat sex buffet was closed. Despite his delinquency, Trevor did have his strong points, and talking was one of them. The guy could sell anything. If he wasn't the most irresponsible person Stephen had ever met, Trevor would make one hell of a realtor. Trevor was even able to sell Stephen on the trip as a sexcation of epic proportions, and Trevor was determined to make good on his word. But the pock-marked bundle of nerves behind the hotel desk was hell-bent on making it an uphill battle. Joel wasn't looking to nab an Employee of the Month plaque. He was actually just looking to keep his job. But one more complaint from a guest, and Joel would be suspended, which meant he could kiss goodbye that nudist singles cruise he'd been saving up for. "It appears we double-booked that particular room," Joel remarked, stating the obvious. You think, dipshit? Now get me the manager. Joel tapped his sweaty hands on the desk nervously. Hey, why don't I find you another room? Another room? Trevor continued. You think I want to stay in a hotel that caters to airport security fetishes? A dude has his standards. And I draw the line at meter-maid costumes. Now, we want our money back. Now let's not get crazy. I'm sure I can come up with something, Joel said, panicky. You're right. Start by giving me my money back, Trevor demanded. Hey, is there a manager around here? Trevor yelled for everyone to hear. Joel tried to pull out a Hail Mary, anything to keep his manager from finding out. Joel bit his lip and searched for an idea. Then it came to him. Sure, he'd have to give up his employee voucher, but Joel found a way to keep his nudist dreams alive. You know, we do have a sister hotel, he said. Trevor considered, intrigued, yet not ready to waver quite yet. Is she hot? Turns out she was pretty hot. And like that, Trevor nabbed a free room at the Lick My Tit Indian Casino Resort and Spa. Who knew there was a reason to thank airport security? Well, at least they're fetishists. And with a Swifty Mart franchisee convention in town, the place was sure to be rockin'. The hotel was swank and slicked, tricked out with enough amenities to distract you as you handed your money over to the casino. Trevor was eager to see how far his sudden good fortune would take him. Stephen was not so cavalier. Please don't gamble away our road trip, Stephen pleaded. It's only gambling if you lose, Trevor insisted, as he slid $100 bill over to the casino cashier. Change $100. The cashier slid one chip back to Trevor. He glared at it. Stephen cracked up. Don't spend it all at once. Trevor ignored Stephen and turned back to the cashier. Is there any way you could give me $101 chips? Stephen had a bad feeling, and watching Trevor so easily distracted by the cocktail waitress roaming the casino floor didn't add to Stephen's confidence. Time to get lucky, Trevor declared, and for once Stephen actually wished Trevor was referring to sex. Trevor gravitated with Stephen in tow to a table of card sharks flanked on all sides by scantily clad gold diggers. Ladies, prepare to be shocked and awed, Trevor boasted, with blustering ignorance of his surroundings. Sir, are you in? The dealer asked. Hell yeah, Trevor declared, sliding half his pile of $1 chips toward the dealer. Sir, there's a $100 minimum bid, the dealer insisted. Trevor slid the pile right back to himself and turned to the gold diggers. Ladies, what do you say we skip the gambling and move straight to getting lucky? The ladies snickered. What do you say you take your broke ass over to the kiddie table? One cracked. Trevor looked over his shoulder at the Low Rollers Club, a table of ragtag misfits featuring Edna, the septuagenarian novelty sweater enthusiast, her bingo buddy, and fanny pack fanatic Althea, T-Bone, the washed-up, never-was rodeo wannabe, and Hector, the English-as-a-second-language migrant worker, letting his paycheck ride. Edna lowered her extra-thick glasses to her nose and squinted at her cards. Is that a 6 or a 9? Darn it! Were these numbers written by midgets? Doesn't matter, ma'am, the dealer insisted. Either way you lose. T-Bone pounded another shot and flirted with Althea. I'll bet you're frisky, honey, T-Bone twanged. I love fanny packs. Althea turned to T-Bone and contorted her face. Can you say that to my good ear? It's true. Some things do get better with age. T-Bone flirted, laying it on thick. Althea let her hair down from her beehive dew and smiled at T-Bone. Well, maybe you will get to see just how frisky I am. Meanwhile, Hector repeated in broken English the only phrase he knew. Heat me. Sir, it's poker, the dealer tried to explain. But Hector continued. Heat me. The dealer tried to clarify. Poker, sir, not blackjack. Heat me. Realizing his luck has run out, Trevor traded high rolling for high balling. This calls for liquor. The lounge was a low-lit haven for hooking up.
a place for boozing and losing inhibitions, and Trevor was more than happy to oblige. Trevor set up shop at the bar, checking out the scene as an all-Native American ska band got ready to rock at the back of the lounge. The lead singer of the band stepped up to the mic. "Good evening. Lick my tit, Indian Casino and Bingo," the singer said. "We are Teepee in my pants, and we're going to take this country over with our badass ska. The first song is called The Ballad of She Who Rides Totem Pole. Enjoy." The band started to play as Trevor sidled up to a cougar at the bar. "Don't you just love the smell of romance at happy hour?" Trevor flirted. "Was it the horny Native American crooning that gave it away?" Roxy rasped, with a sultry voice. "The lady would like a shot of piss with a dash of vinegar," Trevor continued, not giving up so easy. "Or perhaps I can interest you in something a little more refined." "Beat it, kid. I have unused anytime minutes older, thank you," Roxy insisted. "Fine, but I'm not leaving without telling you that you are the queen of Cougar Canyon. Rawr!" Roxy cracked a smile at Trevor's spunk. She scoped Trevor out, then raised her eyebrow at him. "All right, keep talking. So, what are you, a model?" Trevor flirted. "Actually, I work at the DMV. Well, I knew the government was good for something. And I was Miss August in the sultry civil servants of the DMV calendar, though." "There's a sultry servants of the DMV calendar?" "It's the #2 civil servant bikini calendar, right behind wanton women of tax collection, those audit sluts." "I would have pegged the post office #1. I love a woman in shorts," Trevor bragged. Before seeing Roxy's interest wane, he pulled out the big guns. "Or maybe I could interest you in my stick shift." Roxy looked at the bulge in Trevor's pants and bit the corner of her lip. Stephen, meanwhile, opted to nurse his half-price pint for every last drop, but a leggy looker had different plans for him. Amber was just the elixir needed to save Stephen from his dating drought. She welcomed Stephen to the dance floor with a wink and a nod. But Stephen was like the skittish kid at the pool that climbed onto the high board, then couldn't muster the courage to take the plunge. Stephen flashed on his nudist town heart-to-heart with Vicky, and realized there was never a better time to dive back into the dating pool. And Amber was making it easy, giving Stephen a big, welcoming smile. Stephen pushed away from the bar and down one last chug of liquid courage, ready for romance again. Then Love's Labor's Lust played in his pocket. That ringtone meant only one thing. Nicole was calling. Talk about timing. That she dialed Stephen's number just as he was looking to get digits from another woman. But maybe it was kismet, the way it was supposed to be. Maybe Nicole had reconsidered. And like that, Amber had to wait. Stephen dug his phone out of his pocket. "Nicole," Stephen answered, excited. "Oh, my God, I want you so bad," Nicole moaned over the line. "What?" Stephen asked, taken back by Nicole's directness. "You heard me. I want you inside me. Now," Nicole continued. Stephen pinched himself. It seemed like too good to be true. But he'd take late over never any day. Hell, Stephen would have been more than happy to forget the last 2 days ever happened. "Are you serious?" Stephen asked, wanting to make sure it was more than just a fever dream. "Wait, Stephen?" Nicole replied, shocked. "Well, yeah. Well, who else would it be?" "Oh, my God. I hit the wrong button again. Damn this phone." "So you really didn't mean to call me then?" "No, I thought I called Alan." "Wow, this is awkward," Nicole meekly replied. Stephen could feel his heart breaking all over again. He was like a Thanksgiving turkey, carved for the whole world to see, but Nicole was content to cut and run. "Yeah, I gotta go," Nicole said, desperate to get off the phone. And before Stephen could get a word in edgewise, he heard a click on the other end of the line. Trevor was having considerably better luck with the ladies. Roxy and Trevor burst into Roxy's hotel room, their lips locked. Trevor kicked the door closed behind them, then ran his hands down her back. Roxy suddenly came up for air and bit the corner of her lip. "And now it's time for the striptease," she said, seductively. "Cougarlicious," Trevor replied, his eyes lighting up like a Christmas tree. Roxy looked Trevor up and down and licked her lips. "Well, come on. Your clothes aren't going to take themselves off." Trevor furrowed his brow, thrown by the table being turned. "Me?" he asked. "Oh, no. Ladies first." But Roxy wasn't about to budge. "Guess someone doesn't want to get lucky tonight," she said, dismissive. "It's a shame, too. I was really in the mood for multiple orgasms tonight." "Don't tell a soul," Trevor insisted, then whipped off his shirt quicker than a virgin on prom night. "And slow down. This isn't a race," Roxy parried. Trevor took a deep breath, then awkwardly started to twirl his shirt around. "Yeah, where's a video camera when you need one?" Roxy catcalled, only adding to Trevor's inhibition. But Trevor forged on, shimmying slowly. Trevor's striptease was like watching an elk on LSD, a fumbling, uncoordinated disaster. But Roxy ate it up. Trevor then took his pants off as Roxy giggled with glee, trying to be sexy. Trevor twirled his pants on his finger, unfortunately hitting Roxy in the face with them. Sorry," Trevor said, panicked. "Hey, your turn now." Roxy pulled the pants off her face, then looked at Trevor seductively. "All right, but what do you say we skip the teasing and go straight to stripping?" Roxy took off her top, much to Trevor's delight. "Hello," Trevor said, staring at Roxy's rack. "You ain't seen nothing yet," Roxy insisted. Roxy then dropped her skirt, revealing an unexpected guest between her legs. Trevor's jaw dropped. He stared at Roxy's tuck number. Trevor remained aghast, realizing the woman of his dreams was really a man. It had been a nut-crushing day for Stephen. He was more than content to soak his sorrows away in the hotel sauna. Fate had other plans for him, though. Stephen just minded his own misery, dreaming about his own flame while lounging in a sauna pool. "Oh yeah, Nicole," Stephen sleep-talked. "Here comes my big stick." But Stephen had unexpected company poolside. Badrul, a 40-something convenience clerk in the hotel for the Swifty Mart conference, dropped his towel outside the sauna, then climbed into the jacuzzi beside Stephen. "I'd love your curry kebab," Badrul stated, in a thick Hindu accent. Stephen woke up from his wet dreaming, shocked to find out he wasn't alone. He saw Badrul sidled up uncomfortably close and naked beside him. Stephen waited as far back as possible in the sauna pool. "Who in the hell are you, and why are you practically humping my leg?" Stephen cried out. "My name is Badrul Longdonghingon, and it is my distinguished pleasure to be making your intimate acquaintance." Stephen hugged the other end of the pool, freaked out. "Is this not giddily comfortable for you?" Badrul continued. "Oh, I get it. I'm on Bollywood hidden camera," Stephen convinced himself. And then he looked over his shoulder and called out, "Well, laugh it up while you can, call center jockeys. I'm through being clowned." "Holy cow, I have no idea what it is you are babbling on about," Badrul responded, closing the gap between him and Stephen. "But I do know I have rippling abdominals which could be of great interest to you." Badrul flexed what little muscle he had. "Thank Shiva for downward dog, no?" Badrul added, cocky without cause. "There's an image that keeps on scarring," Stephen said, lifting himself out of the pool. "You know, friend, I am not ashamed to tell you, I am a devout scholar of the Kama Sutra. What is your favorite position?" Stephen couldn't get out of the pool fast enough, but Badrul wasn't prepared to give up so easy. "Wait, why is it that you're going so soon? I have not shown you my pleasure stick yet." Stephen tied up his towel and turned to dart away, then slammed into a handlebar-mustached Hindu named Gupta. The collision flung Stephen back into the pool. Gupta, a younger convenience clerk wearing a smock, started to berate Badrul. "Badrul, are you seeking hanky-panky with this pale-faced, clumsy monkey?" he asked. Badrul looked like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "This is not quite illicit, as it appears," he insisted as Stephen surfaces, completely drenched. "Did you or did you not try to serenade him with your happy stick?" Gupta scolded. "Crippling alcoholism, here I come," Stephen muttered to himself, caught in the crossfire. Stephen tried to make a quick exit, but Gupta would have none of it. "Oh, no you don't, fancy man. I cannot believe what it is my heartbroken eyes are beholding." "I'm sorry, Gupta,"
Badrul pleaded. Not as sorry as I, Gupta lamented.
How is it you did not invite me to take part in this carnal delight?
Stephen furrowed his brow, confused. Gupta jumped into the pool with Stephen and Badrul, then turned to Stephen.
What would you say to a Hindu hoagie?
Stephen got out of the pool and dashed away quicker than a rhino on speed.
Or we could begin with a big chupathon,
Badrul insisted, but Stephen was already halfway through the lobby.
Way to go, Ugu,
Badrul laments.
Must you always have to come on like a Bengal tiger?
The minibar didn't know what was coming. Trevor raided the pay fridge like a pirate on a bender, then spent the rest of the night rocking back and forth in a trauma trance. He kept repeating, "That chick had a dick." Stephen took a different tact, reasserting his heterosexuality by burning the midnight oil, slapping his salami in the shower to visions of Nicole. But one thing was certain. Neither of them would ever speak of that night again. Chapter 6. Long Way to Paradise. Stephen and Trevor weren't in Kansas anymore, after being dicked around in Lick-My-Tit. The disillusioned duo burned through the rolling plains like a runaway wildfire on their way to mile-high clubbing. But after 500 miles, 2 piss breaks, and hours of haunted heartland nightmares about other dudes' wieners, Trevor and Stephen were ready to get wrecked in the Rockies. Stephen and Trevor blazed into downtown Denver with booze on the brain, hoping to hit up Cool Balls, the new hipster ping-pong bar in town. Of course, they had to find parking first. "Just park in the lot already, dude," Trevor bellowed, his bladder ready to explode. "For $10? Trevor, do you know how much beer we can buy with that?" "None, if you keep circling the same block. Now stop effing around. I should be buzzed out of my gourd by now." "Fine, I'll park, you pay," Stephen bargained, his butt numb from hours on the road. Trevor conceded, exasperated. "You're lucky I have the bladder of an infant." Stephen parked the van, then leerily headed to the attendant booth while Trevor tried to keep from soiling himself. "I don't like this lot," Stephen protested. "It's a parking lot. What do you want it to come with? A spa and jacuzzi?" Trevor cracked, fed up. Trevor approached Eduardo, a young and cocky but service-challenged attendant, who lounged with his feet up in the parking shanty. Eduardo watched a soccer game intently on a tiny black-and-white TV. "Hey, this lot is safe, right?" Stephen asked. But nothing was going to keep Eduardo from watching his football. "Dude, hombre," Stephen yelled, then nudged Eduardo's shoulder. "My carro is going to be muy safo in this parking lotto, right?" "Sure, dudo," Eduardo deadpanned. The TV announcer then screamed, "Goal!" at the top of his lungs. Eduardo turned back to the TV, irate that he missed the action. Eduardo cursed at the TV in Spanish. Trevor turned to Stephen. "Come on, dude. Don't worry. Your van's so ugly a blind man wouldn't even steal it." Trevor dragged Stephen off, leaving Eduardo slitting his eyes at them. But as Stephen tried to overcome his parking lot leeriness, Trevor chowed down on Sir Gorgelot fast food. "Real classy," Stephen remarked, watching Trevor pound down a Gorgelot burger and fry combo while they walked. "Dude, do you know how much they gouge the prices at these hipster clubs? Trust me, you'll wish you got takeout too." Stephen watched Trevor pull out a sleeve of Miss Yummy's chocolate chip cookies. "You got cookies too?" Stephen asked, incredulous. "What else do you have in your pockets? A pecan pie?" Trevor's bladder gave up on him halfway across the street. "Dude, hold this," Trevor insisted, shoving his big chug cup into Stephen's hand before ducking into an alley. Stephen's hand started to shake as he took the big chug cup. He went to give it back until he heard Trevor relieving himself against the alley wall. "Did you have to bring your big chug cup?" Stephen asked, flashing back to horrors of Swifty Mart past. "Yeah, like I'm gonna drop $10 on a beer," Trevor snapped. "These hipster clubs mug you. Besides, I fit a whole bottle of Blue Label in that sucker." "I know, but did it have to be a big chug cup?" Stephen continued, frazzled. "Did the Swifty Mart shiv you in a past life or something? And by the way, what was with that creepy McStore clerk back at the state line?" Trevor and Stephen had unexpectedly run into Badrul, back from vacation at his local Swifty Mart. Stephen tried to lay low while Bedrules threatened another man's llama over the phone for making him miss desperate cougars. But just as Stephen tried to sneak back to the car, Bedrule sprung alive with excitement at the sight of Stephen. Bedrule called Stephen his favorite curry kebab and said he could die happy to be reincarnated as a majestic ocelot. But the crowning moment came when Bedrule pulled Stephen aside and offered him a menage-a-trois three-way between himself, Stephen, and Trevor. Staring at the big chug cup, Stephen flashed back to the previous night's curry kebab come-ons in the hotel sauna. The Hindu hoagie, the menage-a-trois. He was overcome with an eerie sense of déjà vu. Let's just say I had a bad experience with the Swifty Mart, Stephen uttered, putting his pain lightly. Trevor zipped up, then snatched his big chug cup back from Stephen as a tranny hooker eyed him. "You boys looking for a good time?" the tranny flirted, undressing Trevor with his eyes. Trevor looked at the hooker's thigh-high go-go boots, too short miniskirt, and skin-tight halter top, and just snapped. "Don't start with me, bro," Trevor warned. "Feisty, just how I like 'em," the man of the night continues. "That's it, she-dude. You want to go?" Trevor threatened, like a heavyweight boxer trash-talking at a weigh-in. "Damn, sounds like someone needs to lay off the crack pipe," Tranny insisted. "Dude, chill out. Let's just get out of here," Stephen said, holding Trevor back. Trevor calmed himself, then started to move away with Stephen, but Tranny Hooker just egged Trevor on. "Yeah, you best run away," the hooker with a hard-on warned. Trevor seethed as he walked away with Stephen. "What crawled up your butt?" Stephen asked. "You leave my ass out of this," Trevor snapped, haunted by his nightmare man-on-man makeout session the night before. It was turning out to be a night of déjà vu, though. First there was Stephen's curry kebab callback, then Trevor's near transvestite fight. But the hipster heaven that followed seemed more like just a series of coincidences. It seemed like the ping-pong party wasn't going to get off the table after all. Trevor and Stephen arrived to a line long enough to put the DMV to shame. The place was crawling with skinny jeans and frosted tips. It was the kind of joint you could spend the next 6 months waiting to get into. And when you finally did, everyone had moved on to chasing the next cool. But in the meantime, it was the place to be. Just ask the staff. Standing at the back of the line, Stephen harkened back to another uber-cool night spot from years ago. Trevor and Stephen were just troublemakers with fake IDs back on that cold St. Louis night. Trevor had heard about a new virtual reality joint everyone was tripping over to get themselves into. And after 2 hours in line, Trevor and Stephen soon realized there'd be no fun, virtual or in reality. But as big of a bust as the drive to St. Louis was, it was what had happened afterwards that Stephen would always remember. The duo returned to their favorite watering hole where Nicole was playing jukebox DJ. Love in a one-stoplight town blasted over the speakers. Stephen finally mustered up the courage to make his play on her. And she had one special request from him. Stephen and Nicole disappeared into the back seat of Stephen's car that night and emerged connected at the hip. Back in line outside the club, Stephen was desperate for a chug of Trevor's Blue Label. Everything reminded Stephen of Nicole. The trip was supposed to be a celebration, but instead, it was turning into a trail leading to tears. Trevor was tired of the pity party, though. He had his eyes on the prize. Trevor spotted a gaggle of chicks making a beeline for the bouncer at the front door. Trevor jumped in the line and drafted behind them. "What are you doing?" Stephen asked, pulled from his reminiscing. "Tailgating." The hulkish bouncer, who had more tattoos than brain cells, let his boner get the best of him and allowed the chicks through the velvet rope. Trevor and Stephen tried to sneak in behind the chicks, but the bouncer roadblocked them. "Where do you think you're going?" the bouncer barked. Stephen couldn't help but stare at the neck tattoo while Trevor tried to talk his way into the joint. "We're here with them," Trevor insisted. "The chicks long gone." "Not even in your wet dreams," bouncer growled, like a rabid pit bull. "Maybe my little friend'll change her mind," Trevor hinted, slipping the bouncer a 20. The bouncer pocketed the cash, then dashed Trevor's hope. "Back of the line, bitches," he cracked, never intending to let Trevor or Stephen in. "But I just gave you $20. "That's your loss, bro. Now back of the line," bouncer scowled. It was as if someone had stuck pins into Trevor and Stephen, voodoo doll style. Banished to the back of the line, Stephen wondered why history kept repeating itself. What was he supposed to learn from the striking St. Louis similarities? Trevor took a more base approach to being left out in the cold. That bouncer's a douchebag, Trevor ranted, noticing the line has turned into a sausage fest of rejects. You do realize this is a ping-pong bar, right? Trevor yelled to the bouncer who couldn't hear him. Fuck you, and fuck this. I'm sobering up already. How's a dude supposed to grind till he's blind without the beer goggles? Then Trevor got his answer. I say we go to Giddy Up, a line leery reject whispered to his friends. Trevor was intrigued. What's Giddy Up? It's funny how you could take the hick out of the sticks, but you couldn't take the sticks out of the hick. Giddy Up was a faux country western bar in the thick of the concrete jungle. The place was laid out like an old-school saloon with no tacky stone left unturned. The waitresses dressed like cowgirls, and the waiters like cowboys. A karaoke machine was set up to make fools of the tipsy, but the centerpiece was a mechanical bull, waiting to flail cocky cowboy wannabes like rag dolls. If the ping-pong bar was like dipshit deja vu, Giddy Up was the universe's wake-up call. But to what end? Stephen was too plastered to philosophize. Giddy Up would have been right at home in St. Petersburg, and Stephen figured, when in Redneck Rome, do as the drunks did. Stephen and Trevor hijacked the karaoke stage, belting out a bevy of butchered hits. The best bros were in their element. They were having the time of their lives. Trevor and Stephen were never more at home than when clowning on each other, and that clowning was taking center stage. It was suddenly becoming the trip Stephen had expected from the beginning. Just a pair of goofballs cutting loose. That was what Stephen was going to miss the most about Trevor. The countless carefree nights Trevor and Stephen had spent together back in St. Petersburg were cemented in Stephen's memory. And for 3 songs, they recaptured it. Jane Porter had other plans for Trevor's libido. Trevor was halfway through the second verse of a power rock ballad when the image of Jane riding a mechanical bull took hold of his loins. Trevor migrated from the karaoke stage into Jane's earshot and watches as she finishes her ride. That's one lucky bull, Trevor remarked, smitten. And you're one hell of a bullshit artist, Jane replied. Not her first time in a flirtation rodeo. Sense of humor. I like it. Can't take yourself too seriously. I certainly can't take you seriously. I've heard better come-ons at a mime convention. Yes, well, I'm not clowning around here. No, but clown is the perfect word to describe you. What's a guy have to do to get a little love around here? Trevor asked. Tell you what, Jane bargained, admiring Trevor's pluck. She nudged her head toward the bull. If old Clyde doesn't make you cry like a little bitch, I just might let you buy me a drink. Jane patted the bull's saddle. So what do you say? Trevor cracked back. Depends. Are you going to get up there with me? All right, hotshot. Let's see if you're as dirty as your mouth is, Jane quipped, intrigued. She grabbed her purse and started to walk away, then turned back to Trevor. Well, you coming? Stephen wasn't crooning breakup ballads long before he found himself with new company on stage, but it was the song selection that really left Stephen in a daze. Love in a one-stop-light town played over the speakers, but Stephen and Nicole's song spoke differently to him. Stephen realized for the first time what a sappy, guilty pleasure the song was, and then Stephen found himself guilty of going weepy-eyed over criminally simple rhymes like Trevor and Tracy went cow-tipping. Then before you knew it, they were in her father's barn stripping. Deja vu had finally hit a little too close to home. It seemed every time Stephen was able to get Nicole out of his head, the universe found a way to bring her back to the fore. But there was a reason for everything, and destiny was itching to sober Stephen up. Stephen took a break from singing to belly up the bar beside his new karaoke buddy. Deanna Gale was like instant nostalgia for Stephen, but it was more than the girl-next-door looks and sweet smile that reminded Stephen of home. And neither was it the fact that Deanna's heart was newly trampled as well. Seeing Deanna took Stephen back to the last major crossroads of his life, with the widow Douglas. Though Stephen had only stayed with the widow a short while, he was there long enough to meet Mrs. Douglas' daughter, and Deanna was a dead ringer for his old adopted stepsister. And like the widow's daughter, Deanna had stepped into the role of the wise-cracking sibling Stephen never realized he'd missed so much. Wong Wei, a middle-aged bartender, moseyed over to Stephen and Deanna wearing his Wild West vest and cowboy hat. "Oh, Miss Deanna," Wong said in broken English. "Back again with boyfriend this time, eh?" "Boyfriend?" Deanna asked, confused. Then she turned to Stephen and laughed. "Oh, you mean Stephen? No offense, but you look like my pastor." "He's your pastor?" Wong asked, not getting the sarcasm. "Trust me, I'm anything but," Stephen assured Wong. But Wong continued on. "You should tell Miss Deanna. She needs to stop letting the chains of her past shackle her future." Deanna cut in, all too familiar with unsolicited advice. "Wong, how about you lay off the fortune cookies and get us a few beers?" "I'm just saying, you come in here and act like your Komodo dragon died and your boyfriend left you for a pet psychic," Wong remarked. "2 beers, please," Deanna answered, her patience wearing thin. Stephen turned to Deanna as Wong moved off to get the pints. "So, as your pastor, I should tell you not to let the chains of your past shackle your future," Stephen remarked. "Yeah, right. Like I'm going to take advice from a guy named Wong Wei? I mean, the guy used to be a taxi driver, and now he acts like he knows the meaning of life," Deanna cracked. "I can't believe you got me to sing a song about rainbows and wizards," Stephen said, thinking about the 2 numbers he sang before, Love in a One-Stoplight Town. "Jean-Francois refused to do karaoke with me, said it was beneath him, but eating snails he was fine with." Deanna ranted about her French ex. "At least you didn't get dumped over text message." Deanna tried to one-up Stephen. "Bet your ex didn't name their package the Eiffel Tower." "Thank God for that," Stephen replied, imagining the disturbing possibilities. Deanna looked over her shoulder at Jane riding the mechanical bull. "You know, sometimes I wish I was more like my friend Jane. She used to be all sensitive like us, until her beast of a boyfriend dumped her in the jungle. Ever since then, she's got buck wild. She gets what she wants when she wants it. No strings attached. She's like a praying mantis with breasts." Stephen watched Trevor getting ready to put the moves on Jane. "Well, she's met her match tonight because my friend is a bull and she's a china shop. And trust me, that's no way to live." Deanna sighed. "You're probably right, but I'm just tired of my heart hurting." "You want me to put on a beret and act all French and superior for you?" "I'm sorry. Should I give you a nasty look or text?" Deanna fired back. "Point taken. Look, douchebag or not, it's tough getting over anyone. I mean, I've had this really sweet guy flirting with me for weeks at work. He even invited me to a party tonight. But I'm afraid if I put my heart out there, it'll just get broken again." Stephen thought over Wong's words. Suddenly, a light goes off in his head. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but Wong was right," Stephen declared. "How drunk are you?" Deanna questioned, loopy over Stephen's logic. "Seriously, don't let the chains of your douchebag past shackle your future." "Fine. Right back at you," Deanna cracked. "No, really. You should go to this party. You can't get rid of me that easy." Stephen got serious. "Just say that this guy is the one, but you won't let him pass you by because you're too busy worrying about your ex swinging his baguette around. Like you should talk. Here you are letting the ghosts of Tech's past haunt your future." Stephen sobered up in a hurry with that chaser of a revelation. The bar, the song, the déjà vu. It wasn't to remember Nicole. It was the universe's way of getting Stephen to forget her, to enjoy the present, to not be a fortune cookie victim, to drink, not in condemnation of the past, but in celebration of the future. "You're right," Stephen said, invigorated. "No, I was just being a wise ass." Deanna backtracked. "Deanna, it's time we both take our own advice. Go meet up with this guy. You owe it to yourself to find out if he's the one." "But what about you? I can't just leave you here." "The karaoke machine's calling me." Deanna saw the resolve in Stephen's face. "All right," Deanna conceded. "But I have your number now, and I'm going to make sure you hold up your end of the deal." "I look forward to it," Stephen said, renewed. Trevor was looking for a little sexual renewal. After the carnal constipation of the Redneck Regatta, Intercourse, Nudist Town, and Lick My Tit, Trevor was itching for some old-fashioned cowgirl action. Luckily, Jane lived only a block away from Giddy-Up and seemed ready to give Trevor a smooth ride. Trevor waited in the living room of Jane's cramped one-bedroom apartment with bated breath. Jane made a beeline for the bedroom to slip into something more comfortable, leaving Trevor in a room that could have been inducted into the cookie-cutter Hall of Fame. It was like Jane bought the entire floor model display from a furniture warehouse, the kind of decorating job that seemed to be trying too hard to look normal. "You know, you really don't have to change," Trevor insisted, waiting anxiously on the couch. "Cowgirl is my favorite. I was thinking of shaking things up a little. Is that going to be okay?"
Jane asked, changing in the bedroom out of Trevor's view. Oh, I'll be happy with whatever you're wearing. Or not wearing. I'm glad you said that, Jane continued. All right, you ready for me? Trevor licked his lips in anticipation. Ride me, cowgirl. Stand up and close your eyes first. I want this to be a surprise. Kinky is as kinky does. Trevor smiled and closed his eyes. He started to imagine what Jane would be wearing. He heard Jane approaching and waited, wet with anticipation. Jane whispered in Trevor's ear, I'm gonna do things to you that you'll never forget. Then it happened. Wham! Like a frat brother initiating a pledge, Trevor was paddled in the ass. Trevor winced in pain and shrieked like a little girl. He turned around just as Jane readied the paddle for another strike. It became clear that cowgirl was not on the menu tonight. Trevor stood, slack-jawed, seeing Jane dressed from head to toe in black leather as a dominatrix. With a smirk on her face and a glint in her eyes, Jane was more than ready to take pleasure in Trevor's pain. You scream like a girl, Jane quipped, ready to paddle Trevor again. And suddenly, it was clear why no one else at the bar was impressed by Jane's cowgirl riding, or why Jane invited Trevor up after hearing his less than stellar game. Jane was a closet masochist in a cookie-cutter world, but Trevor was no fan of the skeletons in her closet. Holy shit, Trevor cracked, realizing Jane was ready to do things to him it would take therapy to forget. Are you ready for the chains, or should we stick with the paddle? Jane asked with glee. Jane, is there something you want to tell me? Like, did you make a deal with the devil and lose? Trevor asked, unsure when the tables turned so wildly. Enough talk, Jane snapped. She spanked Trevor with the paddle again. Oh, hell no. I have a very, very sensitive ass, Trevor insisted, fleeing to the opposite side of the room. Plus, this isn't Halloween. Now what the fuck is going on? Just trying to shake things up. Now time for the whip. Will you excuse me for just 1 second? Trevor stuttered, then backed right into the door. Where are you going? What about kinky as kinky does? But it was not the kinky Trevor was talking about. Trevor opened the door in a panic, then darted down the hall, tackling a curry delivery guy. Jane shrugged her shoulders and lamented, He would have made a great gimp, too. Jane then winked at the curry delivery guy, stammering to his feet, an unwitting witness to the bordello of bondage. How about you, Naughty? Jane asked, not wanting to waste the outfit. But the curry delivery guy was halfway down the hall before Jane could even finish her sentence. Jane sighed, whipped into a frenzy for nothing. She muttered to herself, Damn, all dressed up with no one to spank. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. As Trevor considered that years of bad karma had finally caught up with him, Stephen was on a collision course with the past. Back at Giddy-Up, a news anchor broke into the regularly scheduled drink-a-thon to bring Stephen his worst nightmare. The bar was captivated by a rare high-speed chase, with a horrifyingly familiar minivan as the star. Stephen stared at the green van bombing down the highway, with a half a dozen police cruisers in tow. Stephen meanwhile prayed it was not his van, but the news anchor confirmed his worst fears. For those of you just tuning in, police are in pursuit of a perpetrator in a stolen late-model minivan with a Missouri vanity plate taxiderm, the news anchor updated, much to Stephen's chagrin. Stephen may not have been desperate to get away from the past, but the past was sure desperate to get away from him. All of Stephen's earthly possessions, photos, clothes, tokens, memorabilia, hurtled and swerved uncontrollably towards the Rockies, desperate for a mile-high getaway. Stephen muttered to himself, wide-eyed and horrified, I knew I shouldn't have parked in that lot. Stephen then repeated the same thought over in his head. Don't crash, don't crash. But Stephen's screams were drowned out by the mob mentality, Wong chief among them. Crash and burn, the mob chanted, like a crowd at the demolition derby. Crash and burn. Things didn't look good for Stephen. With the police hot on the van's tail, the perpetrator started to swerve in a panic and cut across 3 lanes to an off-ramp at the last second. Stephen's worst nightmare came to fruition in a jumble of twisted steel. The momentum was too much for the perpetrator. Stephen looked on in horror as his van bombed into the pure cement guardrail of the highway's off-ramp. The van crumpled like an accordion. The bar mob cheered at the carnage, unaware the van was Stephen's, or at least what was left of it. In shock, Stephen played the eternal optimist. They can repair that, Stephen insisted, not sure he was even convincing himself. They can repair it. Thank God it's over. At least it's still drivable. But the universe had other plans for Stephen's past. The van erupted in flames, sending a fireball towering into the sky. Another cheer was let out by the bar mob, entranced by the pyrotechnics. "I'm gonna need another drink. Now!" Stephen yelled, defeated, watching his belongings turning to kindling. Trevor entered the bar, still caught in his masochism mess. "You won't believe the night I had." And like that, Stephen's past went up in smoke. The universe was hardly subtle, but it knew how to get a point across. As Stephen sat in the police station, hearing Officer Wright tell him how none of his possessions survived the inferno, Nicole was finally nowhere in Stephen's thoughts. Who needed to burn a bridge when your minivan would do just fine? Finally, kicking and screaming, Stephen was ready to say goodbye to his past, or what was left of it. And with Nicole nowhere in his thoughts, Stephen moved on. But Trevor didn't like where Stephen's going. "Wait a minute, you're just going to bail on me?" "I think it's better I fly to California tomorrow," Stephen argued, as he paced in the duo's chain hotel room. "But don't worry, you can get a cheapo flight back to Missouri from here." But Trevor was in no hurry to get back to Missouri so soon. And not just because he was sorry beyond words about Stephen's van erupting into flames. Hell, the insurance company was going to scratch out a nice big check for the damages. Trevor's worried about the damage of cutting ties and returning to the working world so soon, of leaving the vacation in shambles, about the regret that would follow if Stephen looked back 10 years in the future and realized the fun he could have had. Besides, what better time for a vacation than after losing your car to a fiery explosion? Stephen was not as easily convinced. "Are you high? You seriously want to continue this vacation? If you haven't noticed, between the Amish, the Indians, and the Rednecks, this hasn't exactly been the extravaganza of ecstasy it was advertised to be." But Trevor had no interest in calling it quits, and he wasn't about to let the charred ruins of the minivan change that. "Hey, when those commie bastards shot a monkey into space in the 50s, did we pack it in?" Trevor asked, rhetorically. "No. The U.S. of A. went apeshit. We said, 'I'll see your dirty ape, and raise you a man on the fucking moon.' And when we decide things in America, we damn well do 'em. Then, before you knew it, our astronauts are flipping the bird to those pinkos while doing donuts around their ass in his lunar rover. So I say, ask not what your road trip can do for you, but what you can do for your road trip. Remember, we're going to have the time of our lives, whether we like it or not. So what do you say? Do you want to be a patriot or a pussy?" Maybe it was the thin, mile-high air, or the Americana lining every nook of the hotel room, but Trevor was making sense in his own twisted way, and Stephen wasn't exactly in the mood to jump straight into open houses and life in escrow. The vacation had been advertised as one to never forget, and there still was 1,100 miles to forge fun worth remembering. Besides, who knew what hijinks waited just over the horizon? Chapter 7. Small Talk with a Sword Swallower. Pimp My Rental wasn't Stephen's first choice for a loaner car. But when your van engulfed in flames, sometimes you didn't have much of a choice. Unfortunately, the Joint for Gangstas was the only place open on Sunday. Still, as Stephen and Trevor rolled through the Rockies on 24-inch rims with fake flames painted on the side of their purple and yellow rental car, Stephen was more relieved than ever to have gotten the rental insurance. Even the livestock seemed to stop in their tracks and looked on condemning at the car's rims as Trevor and Stephen rolled past them. "Don't be a player hater, yo!" Stephen yelled at a group of cows, mooing at their tricked-out rental. "That's it. I'm getting a different car tomorrow," Stephen insisted, embarrassed by the bovine glares. "Dude, just sack up," Trevor insisted. "Today is going to be kick-ass. Remember, the circus is in town." "Do you really want to take the word of the nudist whose marriage you didn't break up?" "Dude, never turn down referral sex." As the duo rolled into the red rocks of Utah, Stephen would have preferred a good scotch on the rocks than the flimsy word of a nudist beauty queen. But he already felt like a clown in this car. So what better place to go than the circus? Apparently,
Melinda hadn't warned of Trevor and Stephen's arrival at the big top. A strong man, in a singlet with biceps bigger than Trevor's head, barricaded the back entrance to the circus tent on the outskirts of Cedar City. "Nice singlet," Trevor cracked, trying to break the ice. But the strong man might as well have been a glacier in the Antarctic by the chilly glare he gave Trevor. "And sense of humor to match," Trevor chided. "You must have dozens of prison pen pals. Anyway, I'm here to see Alana." By the look on the strong man's face, Stephen realized he'd have a better chance of getting a Mormon drunk than getting past such a human roadblock. The strong man looked like he could bench press Trevor with one arm, but instead just grunted, "Buy a ticket and come back later. We're closed." But Trevor could talk his way into anything. "Right, bro. The only show I care about is in my pants." The strong man laughed exaggerated, like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. "Ha ha 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 ha. You're in way over your head, bub." "Okay. The big scary guy isn't going to let us in," Stephen kowtowed. "Let's just call it a day." But after promising Stephen an extravaganza of ecstasy, Trevor wasn't about to leave his words to bake in the Utah sun. "No, Melinda referred me to Alana," Trevor insists. "And I'm not leaving until—" "Wait a minute. Melinda?" the strong man asked, interested for the first time. "Yeah?" "Follow me," the strong man remarked. Like Trevor had just uttered the secret password. Stephen was flabbergasted by Trevor's gifted gab once again. Trevor meanwhile strutted, "You ready to get circus freaky?" Strong man ushered Trevor and Stephen backstage, then gave Stephen a cold shoulder. "You stay here," strong man snapped at Stephen. "You come with me." He continued with Trevor. "Sorry, bro. I'll make it quick," Trevor cracked, leaving Stephen in the lurch again. Strong man and Trevor then moved away as Stephen stewed. The bowels of the big top were a hodgepodge of carny delight. A self-bandaging lion tamer took a break from his roaring sidekick. A ringleader faded into the background, reveling in his time away from the spotlight, and an elephant scarfed on peanuts in the corner. It would have been all too surreal if it weren't happening right before Trevor's eyes. The strong man led Trevor into a beat-up dressing room. "Wait here," he commanded, then whisked away. "I haven't had service this good since my last trip to the DMV, Trevor cracked, left alone. Stephen, meanwhile, found himself with unexpected company. "You want me to throw a pie in his face?" a circus clown cracked, hearing of Stephen's predicament. The clown had big shoes to fill as a confidant, but for a man whose living was making people laugh, Bojo Barnes had a tinge of sadness in his eyes. He was halfway through painting his face, suspenders down, but wig on, when he noticed Stephen hugging the wall, desperately out of his element. Bob, the resident sword swallower, also took time out of his busy schedule, deep-throating daggers, to make Stephen feel more at home under the big top. Stephen knew it was impolite to stare, but Bob's bleached mohawk and centaur neck tattoo made etiquette near impossible. Bob looked like a human pincushion, especially parading around shirtless, with his heroin chic frame. Throw in nearly a dozen tattoos, and Bob looked like a human canvas. Bob was a stark contrast to Bojo's family-friendly squeaky nose and jolly potbelly, but they were both better listeners than Trevor had been the entire trip. Maybe it was because they're outcasts themselves, or maybe they just recognized a troubled soul. Either way, Stephen was happy for the audience. "I want to stop having a pie thrown in my face," Stephen bemoaned, drunk on disdain for always playing the wallflower. But this was supposed to be a blowout party for old best bros. But so far, I've been left out in the lurch more than a comic book geek at a fashion show. "You know, I had a friend that juggled chainsaws," Bob confided, matter-of-factly. "Used to drive the freaks nuts. I thought it was my ticket to a wild ride, but at the end of the night, he'd be off, putting a spell on Wiccans, while I was stuck swallowing swords." "I know how that goes," Bojo lamented. "One guy gets to clown around, while the other gets stuck holding his seltzer bottle. Crazy thing is, when the circus leaves town, you end up missing him." "Miss him? No offense, guys, but I didn't drive out here to clown around and make small talk with a sword swallower," Stephen replied. "You can say you won't miss him, but you don't know pain.
until your best buddy runs off with a mime. It was unspeakable suffering. Trust me. Appreciate this Trevor while he's still around, Bojo advised. Yeah, losing your bro can be just as rough as losing your broad. When salts are, ditch juggling machetes to become an accountant. I hadn't swallowed fire for a week, Bob remarked, looking like his wound still hadn't healed. Okay, I'm going to wait outside, Stephen cracked, uninterested in listening to the voices of reason. Stephen went to get up from the couch. Bob and Bojo each put a hand on Stephen's shoulders and pulled him back down. Listen to us. Once Trevor's gone, you'll never be able to fill that bastard's oversized shoes, Bojo warned. Yeah, appreciate the info while you can, 'cause when he's gone, it'll be like a dagger to the heart, Bob added. And like that, the pity party took a turn for the profound, and while Stephen pondered, Bob and Bojo had other plans up their sleeves. Hey, I know what will perk you up, Bojo bragged. Wait until you see the contortionist work her twisted magic. As Trevor sat in the dressing room, impatiently awaiting his referral nookie, he recalled his last backstage booty call. It was at the Mississippi Valley Renaissance Pleasure Fair. Cecilia was a buxom-bosomed self-proclaimed wench, ready to be Lancelot before taking the stage to play Ophelia. It was impromptu orogeny, hearkening back to the simpler times before S&M surprises, tranny trickery, and the mattress-mark mishmash. But back in the tent, Trevor was desperate to turn his fornication fortune around. The recent ribald rut seriously had Trevor considering that there might actually be consequences to his actions. So when a leggy, limbered, tight-bodied acrobat made her way into the dressing room, Trevor breathed a much-needed sigh of relief. Oh, hello, the acrobat remarked, surprised, clearly expecting the room to be vacant. Trevor gazed up at her, eager to make a big splash under the big top. Damn, he let slip. The acrobat smiled, flattered, and then started limbering up for her performance. Oh, no, you don't have to stretch, Trevor insisted, itching and ready to go. I always stretch before a performance, the acrobat insisted. Well, I don't know if I'd go so far to call it a performance, Trevor replied, although it can be pretty earth-shattering. Well, naturally, it's the headlining act. But hey, who am I to be modest if you aren't? Anyway, if you'll excuse me, I have to change into my costume. Oh, we don't have to role-play, unless you don't happen to have a postal worker uniform, do you? Acrobat uniform. Trevor's eyes lit up like a gold miner hitting the mother lode. Acrobat? He repeated, delighted. So, I guess that means you're pretty flexible. I can bend all the way back and touch my toes. Trevor popped up, bristling with excitement. Screw the uniform. Let's just do this. Do what? Oh, come on, Alana. Wait, you think I'm Alana? You mean you aren't here to give me naughty sex? The acrobat laughed. No, she replied. A pit developed in Trevor's stomach. But if you're not Alana, then who is? I am, Alana called out in a deep, raspy tone. Given the pit in his stomach and his recent history with not-so-stellar surprises, Trevor was reluctant to turn around. And when he saw a bearded lady before him, the giant brick of a woman with scraggly cat-lady hair and full facial accoutrement, Trevor realized there was no harsher revenge than a nudist scorned. So, you ready for some circus coitus? Alana asked. Trevor scrambled for an excuse to bail. He stammered before letting out verbal diarrhea. Actually, I forgot my condoms? Alana jumped in. Good thing I have a case in my trailer. And they're ribbed for my pleasure, she bragged. I meant my penis pills, Trevor replied, determined to talk his way out of this situation with Alana's feelings intact. Yep, I can't get it up. I am limper than a gay man at a breast buffet. I'm so sorry, Alana responded, deflated. Yeah, it's really embarrassing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take some time to contemplate my flaccidness. Trevor slowly walked past Alana, then reached the doorway and sprinted away. Alana furrowed her brow and tried to console herself. I guess it's back to riding the unicyclist. The car ride back from the boonies was nearly as quiet as the serene setting. But the passing canyons did little to mend the widening chasm in Trevor and Stephen's friendship. Trevor and Stephen were trapped in their own thoughts. Trevor wondered if his luck for easy love was long gone, while Stephen pondered the poignancy of the sword swallower and his seltzer sidekick's advice. "Never trust a nudist," Trevor spouted to himself, while shaking his head in disbelief over the bearded surprise. Stephen couldn't help but crack up. Trevor did not appreciate the ridicule. "How about a little sympathy, dude?" Trevor demanded. "I just got served a beard sandwich." But after a trip of misfires and mischief, Stephen was a powder keg of resentment, ready to blow. "What about me? You just left me there." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a thing for chicks with facial hair." "Well, feel free. She's all yours." "You know what I'm talking about," Stephen snapped, his fuse getting shorter. "Dude, what's your problem? Did someone give you a freelance prostate exam or something? Redneck Regatta? Lick my tit? The blue ball big top? This was supposed to be a brocation, but you've been bailing on me the whole trip. Sorry if I don't want to hear you pining for a chick who's housing another dude's sperm." Trevor snapped, digging the Nicole dagger deeper. And with that, Stephen erupted, like a long, simmering volcano. Stephen's resentment came out molten hot and ready to burn. "At least I've had a chick long enough to remember their name in the last decade," Stephen vented. "What happened to you, man? I mean, ever since Becky Thatcher..." But Trevor had his unmentionables too, and Stephen just mentioned her. "I told you never to bring that name up again," Trevor barked, like a rabid pit bull. "I'm just saying, ever since Becky, you've turned into a hurricane of havoc." It was just about to turn into a no-holds-barred war of accusations. A decade of old grievances took center stage. The cauldron has finally boiled over. And it was about more than just a road trip. It was about old scores and newly opened sores. "Yeah? Well, there's only so much room on Aunt Polly's fridge for certificates of awesomeness." "You mean my report cards and old monthly sales reports?" "Whatever. You don't understand what it's like spending your last decade constantly reminded that you don't measure up. But how could you? You're too busy having Aunt Polly heap praise on you," Trevor snapped. "She was plenty proud of you, too, until you started collecting pink slips like medals, moved back into her basement for 6 years, and plowed through the daughters of her book club like they were dominoes. You know, it's funny you should bitch about being bailed on. Who was the one that decided to pick up and move clear across the country again? Oh, right. Well, how do you think it feels to be left in St. Petersburg?" So that's what it was really about. What it had been all along. Stephen just hadn't realized it. Stephen's heart sank. It became clear how hard the toll had been on Trevor, how much he resented the move, how he was taking it as a personal affront to their friendship, an abandonment. All the shenanigans were just Trevor's way of acting out his frustration. How it was all a ploy for attention. Stephen had been spending all his time with Jim, laying out their future real estate endeavors, or with Nicole and the life they were planning together. But everything was clear to Stephen, and he knew just what he wanted to do. "You're right," Stephen declared, contrite. "I'm really sorry, man." Trevor calmed down and furrowed his brow. Realizing apologizing was more than a one-way street, he reviewed the misadventures of the road trip over in his head. The Hindu hoagie, the potpourri of STDs, the Amish near-ass-whooping that Stephen had been subjected to. What a difference the open road made to free up communication. "I'm sorry too, dude," Trevor replied, imagining how different the trip could have been as a duo of debauchery instead of single-serving shenanigans. "So you really had to make small talk with a sword swallower, huh? And a clown, too." Trevor and Stephen laughed at the absurdity of their predicament. "Sounds to me like you're in a serious need of a good time," Trevor said, with an all-too-familiar smirk. "So what do you say, when we get to Vegas, we make up for some lost mischief?" Stephen smiled uncontrollably, with one thought flashing over and over in his head.
Sin City wouldn't know what hit it. Chapter 8. In it to sin it. To most people, Las Vegas was a heathen heaven, a mayhem mecca, a boozer's best friend, the cut-loose capital of the world, the place you went to do things that you pretended never happened. But Trevor and Stephen were there to make things happen they'd never forget. Stephen was just happy they were doing it together. Desperate as Stephen was to recapture the wanton ways of yore, the timing of things weighed heavy on his mind. He stood at his hotel window, staring at the neon jungle of the Strip outside, when it struck him how it was the last hurrah. They'd be in California the next day, with Trevor catching a flight back to Missouri shortly after. So Vegas was bittersweet. Trevor did not seem to have such weighty issues on his mind as he traipsed out of the bathroom in clubbing clothes. "You ready to party harder than an inmate on parole?" Trevor asked. But Stephen just kept looking out at the Strip, the desert sand like an hourglass. "All right, what's wrong now?" Trevor added, annoyed. "This is really it, man. We'll be in California tomorrow," Stephen remarked. "Yeah, that's right," Trevor replied, realizing how quickly the end was approaching. Trevor furrowed his brow, and like always, found just the right sentiment. "Well, guess there's only one thing we can do then." "What's that?" Stephen asked. "Get so plowed we can't remember what we're supposed to be missing." In typical Vegas fashion, the night was like a blur, a kaleidoscope of techno, strobe lights, booze and babes. But although Stephen wouldn't remember the particulars, he'd never forget the experience. 1,000 miles west, and a little less redneck than planned, he finally had his going-away party, and it was badass. Stephen savored every shot, every bump and grind, every moment. Stephen woke up on the ground, in a stranger's suite, straddling a stripper's pole, wearing just tighty-whities. As he tried to get his bearing, he questioned whether he enjoyed the evening a little too much. Lupe would have disagreed, if she spoke a word of English. She sat across the room from Stephen, a rotund wreck with a double chin, tree-trunk cankles, and a smile as wide as the Mississippi. She oogled Stephen while putting her hotel maid uniform back on across the room, ready to brag of her conquest. Although, when you were Lupe's size, any sex was cause for celebration. "Oh, Dios mío," Lupe bragged in Spanish. "Burrito muy grande." She held her hands out, miming the size of Stephen's dick. "This is definitely staying in Vegas," Stephen muttered to himself, with the urge to regurgitate rather than celebrate. The rancid revelations continued on as Zhu, a pint-sized, bulldog-faced, middle-aged woman, came out of the bathroom while also zipping up her hotel maid uniform. Her jet-black hair was tangled in a post-coit frazzle. Stephen wanted to believe that housekeeping had just come early, and that the hotel sent 2 maids because the room was so big. Zhu alleviated all doubt. "Oh, the naughty boy is awake," Zhu yelled, in broken English, flashing her buck teeth. "You so kinky. You fuck like goat." "Wait a minute. You mean you and I did it?" Stephen asked Zhu, incredulous. Then turns to Lupe. "Then you and I did it?" "Don't be silly, man," Zhu replied. "You got the 2 for 1 noodle special, and it was delicious." "Oh, conquistador," Lupe added. It was hardly the threesome of male fantasy, rather a cautionary tale of debauchery gone downhill. And although Stephen was on the rebound, he hoped for a more illustrious reintroduction to the world of carnal delight. "Worst threesome ever," Stephen muttered to himself, desperate to raid the minibar to scrub away any memory of the event from his psyche. But where Stephen saw regret, Zhu saw opportunity. "Well, now you awake, I ride you like rabid bull," Zhu reveled, before serenading Stephen with her panties. Stephen burst out of the room and down the hall, never more excited to hear elevator music in his life.
Trevor would have killed to hear the dulcet tones of elevator music's master pan flautist. Instead, he was the victim of nasty glares from trinket-toting octogenarians. The sight of Trevor laying half-naked in a discount bingo hall was enough to stop many a pacemaker, but Esther was the trump card to topple the bridge club bash. She was the kind of person you'd expect to spend her golden years rubbing bobbleheads for good luck in the no-frills world of low-stakes bingo. Yet there she was, her sundress ruffled, her walker knocked clear over, with her bifocals nowhere in sight. "Damn, I ain't been fucked that way since Kwanzaa," Esther bragged to Trevor, squinty-eyed and blissfully unaware of the public spectacle she was starring in. Trevor was too busy picking up his jaw from the floor to respond. Ditto for Esther's bingo buddies, who gasped loudly. "Now, be a dear and pass me my dentures," Esther added. "I'm up for a little early bird special." This wasn't the sex fest Trevor had envisioned. It was supposed to be the last hurrah for haberdashery, not Trevor's libido. But it seemed Trevor's kinky karma had finally caught up with him. Gone were the days of waking up in random postal trucks without repercussions. There were expectations of commitment, of maturity, of more than carefree carnal exploration. Trevor had been frequently finding himself post-coit bearing the brunt of angry mattress moguls, the extracurricular expectations of an eel trainer, or the humiliation of Granny Nookie. Even the nudist had more than hooking up on her mind. And when the sex did come easy, a tranny, masochist, or drunken case of mistaken identity were usually behind it. Sure, a bearded lady was open to an easy lay, but Trevor couldn't remember the last time he had a hot and heavy hit and run with a serious hottie. Trevor was at a crossroads. Hell, part of the reason he jumped at the trip was to escape the calamities his commitment phobia caused. But even worlds away from home, he found himself in libido limbo. Turns out you couldn't outrun your past, even in Vegas. So what was a man-child to do when even Sin City's one-night stands couldn't free him from his rut? Trevor didn't know, but he was fairly certain the meaning of his life wasn't going to come to him in a body-odor-riddled taxi with fuzzy dice on the dash and a cabbie humming along with novelty ukulele tunes behind the wheel. Only in Vegas could you walk half-naked down a hotel hallway without anyone batting an eye. But when your crotch started vibrating, people took notice. Stephen felt a sudden jiggle around his junk as he got closer to his room. But using his underwear as a cell phone holder wasn't the only hungover revelation Stephen came to. In the process of high-tailing away from the menage a maid, Stephen realized he'd misplaced his room key. And, already blushing from the passing glares of other hotel guests, Stephen wasn't about to do the walk of shame down to the front desk. So, when his phone started vibrating, Stephen answered it, without bothering to check the caller ID. Naturally, assuming it was Trevor, en route with the other key. "Oh, thank God. Where are you?" Stephen asked. But Stephen was in for a whopper. Turns out it wasn't Trevor on the other end of the line, but Nicole. "Right at home, waiting for you, baby. And boy, do I need you," Nicole stated, as if she hadn't hopped on a horny porta-potty peddler days earlier. Stephen wasn't about to fall for the wrong number nonsense again, though, especially not while he was locked out of his room, hiding his junk from fanny-pack tourists. "Get a new phone, Nicole," Stephen snapped, sure she'd dialed the wrong digits on her cell. Only she hadn't. "Cupcake, I miss you," Nicole replied. I just want you back, Stephen." Even fully clothed, Stephen wasn't prepared for a bomb like that, and Stephen's hangover only added to his hysteria. Of all the cities to get that call, of all the hotel hallways, of all the various states of undress, but deep in the desert, Stephen was determined to make sure this wasn't all just a mirage. Wait, but what? What about Alan? He insisted. "You mean Sir Douchalot? He was only using me to get back at Amy Lawrence. Now come on, Cuddle Muffin. Don't make this hard on me. Just come back to St. Petersburg and be mine." "But Nicole, I'm in Vegas," Stephen stuttered, unequipped for a heart-to-heart at this moment. "That's okay," she replied, sounding more and more like the sweet Nicole had fallen for. "Whatever happened in Vegas, I'll let stay in Vegas. I just want you back." Stephen wasn't about to let Nicole slide that easy. But I'm going to be in California this afternoon, he argued. And after what you did to me, just come back to St. Petersburg, Stephen. It's where your family is. It's where I am. It's where you belong. So please just come back to me. But if you want me that bad, then why don't you just join me in California? Because California's no place for a simple country chick like me. And deep down, you know it's not the place for you either. It was just too much for Stephen to process in the clutches of a stomach-churning hangover. You just can't spring this on me, Stephen added. Just think about it, Nicole insisted. I want you back. I need you back here, Stephen. I'll be waiting for your call. And like that, being locked out of his room half naked and hung over was the least of Stephen's worries. The road out of Vegas was prickly, and not just because of the passing cacti. Vegas sucker-punched Trevor and Stephen, leaving their stomachs turning more than a day-old shrimp cocktail. Trevor and Stephen rifled through radio stations, desperate to avoid the mess of their minds. But love songs weren't the music to their leery ears. Of all the ironies, for Stephen to get a distress call from his ex, just as he was about to start a new life halfway across the country. But Stephen started to think maybe the missteps of the trip were actually roadblocks. It hadn't become a sexcation of epic proportions, but rather a comedy of errors. And after finally making up for lost mayhem with Trevor, Stephen wasn't eager to send him packing to Missouri. Maybe Nicole had called at just the right time. Maybe St. Petersburg was in the cards for Stephen. Maybe you could really go home if the cast of characters featured both Trevor and Nicole. The fact was, rebound romance hasn't quite bounced the way Stephen wanted it to, and as much as Nicole had skewered his heart, Stephen missed the hell out of her. But Nicole had whacked Stephen's heart around like a piñata, and if she did it once, who was to tell she wouldn't do it again? And who knew if he could forgive her for doing it once? Even if Stephen could forgive, could he ever get the image of a banana-hammocked porta-potty peddler jackhammering his girlfriend out of his head? Stephen was also in no hurry to go back to the life and lowbrow times of a redneck realtor. Talk about a tail between your legs experience. He'd be no more than a hick Stevenster again, the son of the town drunk who couldn't quite make it good enough. Trevor, meanwhile, found his thoughts cluttered with other follies. If a playground of cross-country coitus wasn't enough to free Trevor from his funk, what the blue ball BS would be waiting for him when he got back home? It seemed like Trevor would be returning to hometown horrors with no Stephen in tow. California was supposed to be the promised land, but for Trevor, it seemed only to promise heartbreak. Burning through the already scorching morning desert into the Golden State, Trevor and Stephen were like gutted gamblers who'd lost it all on one hand. Lost souls trying to piece together how their plans had gone so wildly astray. Just a pair of bewildered bros with no answers and no clue what was waiting for them beyond the horizon. Chapter 9. Sex on the Beach. The City of Angels was a godsend after the cross-country kookiness that preceded. It was like teleporting into a beer commercial. Around every corner was a new, mind-blowing assortment of sports cars, gorgeous women, and bars primed for happy-hour hookups. The Golden State had rolled out the red carpet, leaving Trevor and Stephen feeling bigger than stars on the Walk of Fame. Hollywood be damned, though. Trevor and Stephen were beach-bound for bikini babes. But crashing waves, a clear blue sky, and sun-tanning took an abrupt back seat to the scantily clad carnival that unfolded before them. "Dude, we hit the mother lode," Stephen said, marveling at his new hometown. "Houston, we have a boner," Trevor replied, his head on a swivel, checking out passing hotties. But every party had an unwelcome crasher. Enter a portly French fool in a thong, his baguette desperately suffocated by tight spandex. The typical French twit that assumed his accent could overcome his doughy display. "And now I'm going to gouge my eyes out with a spork," Trevor cracked, ready to regurgitate. For every Frenchie full of himself, though, there were a dozen dames decked out in almost nothing. Trevor and Stephen spotted a roving band of tight bodies taking a stroll on the beach. Trevor and Stephen's jaws dropped again. "I want to reach out and touch myself," Trevor remarked with sheer delight. But Stephen couldn't delight long, as a tennis ball hurtled through the air and hit him straight in the nuts. Stephen keeled over and fell to the ground, clutching his crotch. A lab puppy ran over and fetched the tennis ball from the sand, while Trevor was caught oogling. "Little help, dude," Stephen called to Trevor, pulling away from his chick radar. Trevor started helping Stephen up until he saw Alice Walsh bound towards him. Alice had shoulder-length dirty blonde hair, an athletic build, and the face of an angel. But despite her knockout looks, she had the smile of the girl next door, and the personality to match. Unfortunately for Stephen, she also had the aim of a blind sniper. "I'm so sorry," Alice said, coming over to apologize. "Don't worry about it," Trevor assured her. An easy feat for someone who didn't just get it right in the nuts. "Hey, speak for yourself," Stephen insisted, back to his feet in time for Alice's puppy to start humping him in the leg. "Wow, Pee-wee really likes you," Alice added, without a hint of sarcasm. "Yeah, a little too much," Stephen complained. "No, that's a compliment. He's usually very confrontational with strangers. You must have a good soul," Alice remarked. Trevor cut in. "My soul can kick his soul's ass," he flirted. Pee-wee growled at Trevor. Alice shrugged off Trevor's come-on and turned her attention back to Stephen. "You two should get a room," Alice joked, referring to the puppy humping Stephen's leg. "At least he could buy me a drink first," Stephen played along. Alice laughed, then wisecracked back. "Why don't you leave that to me?" The universe was playing a tug-of-war with Stephen's heart. If Stephen was teetering towards returning to the comforts of home just hours before, California's milk and sweet honeys were making a serious play to totter him back to golden state dreaming, and happy hour with Alice and her friend was just the cherry on top of Stephen's newfound delicious Sunday. The hotties excused themselves for girls' talk in the ladies' room, leaving Trevor and Stephen to revel. "Welcome to my speed dial," Trevor bragged, adding a phone number to his cell. "I wouldn't get too excited. I think Alice's friend is looking for a prince, not a putz. Still, this is the kind of lifestyle I can get behind," Stephen said, his mind getting more made up by the minute. "Damn, you lucky bastard," Trevor bemoaned. "Hey, there's enough hotties to go around," Stephen insisted. "Yeah, except I've got a lousy day pass while you're a lifetime VIP. What's the matter with you? I've never seen someone so upset to get a chick's number." "This isn't about some chick's number. It's about this place. Look around. It's a fucking paradise." "Bullshit, man. Bullshit. Did someone spike your drink or have you gone completely off your rocker? Don't you get it, dude? I wanted California to be shittier than a Cleveland steamer, that it would be some crime-riddled bullshit Schittsburg. But California fucked me up the ass. I mean, look around. The fucking pancake waitress makes Miss St. Pete look like an English bulldog. But dude, why would you want me to hate it here?" Stephen asked. "So you'd come back to Missouri with me, man. I mean, fuck. I've known you since you were 5. We discovered internet porn together, smoked our first bowl together, did our first keg stands together. You're my best friend, man. But it's all over now. Trevor, we're not going to stop being friends. The hell we won't. This was the last hurrah, man. Don't get me wrong. It was the best week of my life. But it's over. I mean, come on. No one's ever written a song wishing they could all be St. Petersburg girls. So come on. Once you're motorboating Alice, you really think you're going to give a shit about Missouri?" Stephen went to answer, but couldn't find the words. Stephen didn't know what to say, what to do. He had a past with Nicole, but the future sure looked bright with Alice. He'd found paradise, but was losing Trevor. He had to make the biggest decision of his life, but had little time left to do it, and it was no easy decision, especially after a night out on Sunset Strip, splurging with Alice as a tour guide. So there Stephen was, in the airport terminal, feeling like a rag doll, torn at the seams by rival siblings. Trevor stood before him, with his brow furrowed over more than the frisking from the airport security that was sure to follow. "So this is really it," Stephen sighed, not believing the words, even as he said them. "Don't remind me," Trevor groaned. "Look, I'm not really good at this, so let's just make it short and sweet." "I agree." Stephen put out his hand to shake Trevor, his fingers trembling with trepidation. "Try to lay off the meter-maid porn, dipshit," Trevor advised, giving Stephen a shake. "Oh, and fuck some palm readers for me. Try not to bone all of St. Petersburg." Overcome with emotion, Trevor decided a handshake wasn't enough, and gave Stephen a quick hug. A fat tourist waddled by, with his fanny pack in tow, leaving Trevor embarrassed. He pushes Stephen away and quipped to reassert his masculinity.
For the last time, I won't fuck you up the ass, Trevor insisted. But Stephen was too choked up to wisecrack back. Later, bro. I'm really gonna miss you, dude, Trevor muttered, with watery eyes. Aw, fuck, dude. Why couldn't you just come back with me? Trevor asked, then grabbed his carry-on before heading towards a security checkpoint. And like that, just the moment Stephen hadn't been waiting for was there. The teary-eyed goodbye. The end of an era. The swan song to shenanigans. It was Stephen's turn to furrow his brow, desperate not to let Trevor depart. Then it came to him, a way to have California, and Trevor too. Why don't you stay here with me? Stephen called out, as Trevor stands shoeless, his dignity tucked away with his belongings in the X-ray bucket. Are you serious? Trevor replied, enlivened. Yeah, dude, it's like you said, there's plenty of chicks to go around, and you could crash at my place. You mean like roommates? Only until you get a pad of your own. Well, yeah. No offense, bro, but you have the style of a blind hobo. So, what do you say? Want to stick around in California for the next 10 to 20 years? Trevor could hardly contain his excitement. His mind started racing with randy possibilities. The band didn't have to break up. He had a whole new town to be a fuck-up in, and it was just the escape Trevor had been waiting for. And he got to do it with his favorite partner in crime. But, elated as Trevor was, he played it cool. Depends. It won't cramp your style, will it? Just shut up and say yes. All right, but you drive a hard bargain. Epilogue. The man-child and the mother-lode. What a difference California made! Instead of Redneck realtor business cards, Stevens read Realtor to the stars. Instead of waking up haunted by the ghosts of his muddy Mississippi riverboat past, he woke up beside the surf and sand of the Pacific Ocean. And, more importantly, instead of coming home to a banana-hammocked cowboy itching to jackhammer his lady love, Stephen came home to sweet as can be Alice, looking to warm his heart rather than trample it. California had even managed to tame Trevor a touch. He was more man than child, less of a whirling master of mischief, though not quite ready to move out of the shallow end. Trevor had decided to put his gift of gab to work, and when he managed to pass his real estate exam, Stephen and Jim would welcome him into the fold at their agency. The only problem was getting Trevor to sit down and study. Sure, by night he took his classes, but by day Trevor was up to familiar antics. He'd taken a job as a pool boy to pay the rent, and in Newport Beach stumbles into some fringe benefits in the form of a desperate divorcee. Celeste Jameson was a former trophy wife who'd made off with a killing in the divorce. She didn't have to work another day in her life, and she was more than content to watch Trevor work his pole. She was the perfect fit for Trevor. Neither was interested in a relationship. They just wanted to explore each other's bodies. Stephen and Trevor were exploring new heights of happiness. They had hit the mother lode in the Golden State, and couldn't imagine things any other way. And though they weren't sure what the future had in store for them, they knew it would be one hell of a ride. The end. This has been Cruising for a Boozing, written by Michael Bryan. Narrated by Craig T. Adams. Copyright 2011. Current by Michael Bryan. Production copyright 2015 by Michael Bryan.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.